It is said there is no knowledge that is not power, a statement which holds especially true for those who dare to play the Game of Thrones. Every player should seek to know all there is about their opponent, study them closely, learn all there is to be learned. What are their deepest secrets? What are their darkest shames? What is their heart's desire? For when you know what someone wants, you know who they are and how to move them. This is advice given by none other than Petyr Baelish, one of the more infamous players in the great game. For this video, I want to discuss Petyr Baelish's upbringing and how it shaped him into the man he is now, and how his rapid rise will lead to his great fall. Gentle viewer, I implore you, heed the warnings on screen. We venture into strange territory this time. Tread carefully. Viewer discretion is advised. Part 1. The Rise. We have discussed the life and lies of Lord Varys. We have discussed the possible identities of one Grand Maester Pycelle. Now, it's time to turn our attention to another member of the late King Robert's small council, Petyr Baelish. Many a reader has been wondering, what is Petyr up to? Is he buying those men without a face, moving money from place to place? What's his plan? What's his plan? It seems to me that Petyr is a man of simple desires. He wants status. He wants a beautiful woman at his side. But what Petyr wants most of all is revenge. Before we get into the theory, please do me the honor of liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. And now, on with the video. Slight, short, and slender of build, Lord Petyr Baelish is first introduced in A Game of Thrones. For many years, Petyr served on King Robert's small council as his Master of Coin, a role that made him responsible for the crown's finances. I believe Petyr Baelish is partly inspired by the French statesman Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, who once said, quote, "I am more afraid of an army of 100 sheep led by a lion than an army of 100 lions led by a sheep." Petyr Baelish once said, quote, "I've never been frightened of shepherds. It's the sheep who trouble me." Charles Maurice de Talleyrand came from somewhat humble beginnings himself, being born into the lesser nobility. He rose high after he was given offices and titles by none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. But just because he was up-jumped by the emperor doesn't mean he was loyal to him. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand remained very fluid in his allegiances. Some considered him a man loyal to his country. Others viewed him as a traitor. Similar traits can be applied to Petyr Baelish. As Master of Coin, Petyr placed his own men into important positions. The keepers of the keys, the king's counter and king's scales, officers in charge of the mints, harbor master, tax farmers, them and many more all belonged on Petyr's payroll. You would think Petyr's activities would have aroused suspicion, but quite the contrary. To quote from a Tyrion chapter from Book 2, "No one ever thought to question the appointments, and why would they? Littlefinger was no threat to anyone, a clever, smiling, genial man, everyone's friend, always able to find whatever gold the king or his hand required, and yet of such undistinguished birth, one step up from a hedge knight, he was not a man to fear. He had no banners to call, no army of retainers, no great stronghold, no holdings to speak of, no prospects of a great marriage." End quote. It's easy to maneuver and mass power when no one views you as a threat. By the time they see you for what you are, it'll be too late. From this lofty, well-secured position, he would come to witness and influence many major events that would take place over the course of the story, such as the unprecedented dismissal of Sir Barristan Selmy from the King's Guard, the arrest and execution of Lord Eddard Stark, the great Lannister-Tyrell alliance, an alliance which almost ended with the assassination of Joffrey, the Bastard King. Rising to such heights was quite the accomplishment for someone as lowly born as Petyr Baelish. Petyr was born to very humble beginnings in the year 268 AC. His birthplace is known as the Fingers, a narrow stretch of peninsulas near the Narrow Sea, northeast of the Vale of Arryn. Unlike Varys, who derives his title of Lord from his place on the small council, Petyr's title is no mere honorific. He was born the only heir of the House of Baelish. His grandfather was a Braavosi sellsword in service to House Corbray. His father was a hedge knight who managed to accomplish the impressive feat of becoming a landed knight. A landed knight is exactly what it sounds like, a knight who has managed to acquire land, property that could be passed down to future generations. While it is not unheard of for those of low birth to rise to the ranks of nobility, it is far from common. The sigil of House Baelish is the head of the Titan of Braavos, a gray stone with fiery eyes on a light green field. Petyr's father may have increased the family's fortunes, but he was still ranked among the smallest of small lords. The Fingers are a desolate, windswept shore. The resources are spare, the population scarce. The seat of House Baelish is an unnamed old flint tower. You would think one might be content with lands and a title, a place to call home, even a humble home such as this, but not Petyr Baelish. Most parents dream of their children leading a better life than they did. Petyr's father was no different. When he was young, his father took him to a hermit's hovel to have his future foretold. The hermit was said to have the gift of prophecy. For a skin of wine, the hermit examined Petyr and declared he would grow to be a great man, thus giving us one of the least impressive prophecies in the series. Still, it is a prophecy of sorts, and we should give it some consideration. Did this hermit have the gift of foresight, or was he just a drunkard? Mayhaps he was both. But in the case of Petyr's prophecy, it seems to me the hermit was simply telling Petyr's father what he wanted to hear. In a world of ice zombies, dragons, myth, and magic, the life of Petyr Baelish is more mundane than magical. We never hear of this hermit again. During the War of the Nine Penny Kings, Petyr's father became a close companion of Hoster Tully, Lord Paramount of the Trident. It was through this connection that he was able to have his son invited to be fostered at Riverrun. To rise in the world, it's not often what you know, it is who you know. As a ward of Hoster Tully, a young Petyr would be raised alongside his heirs, his son Edmure and his two daughters, Catelyn and Lysa. Riverrun is where the foundations of Petyr's future get laid. It is also where Petyr gets laid, if you believe his version of the events. At Riverrun, Hoster Tully was never much present for his children, which meant his brother Brynden was often required to play a parental role, not just for Hoster's children, but for Petyr as well. Quote, "It had been Brynden the Blackfish to whom Lord Hoster's children had run with their tears and their tails when father was too busy and mother too ill. Catelyn, Lysa, Edmure, and yes, even Petyr Baelish, their father's ward. He had listened to them all patiently as he listened now, laughing at their triumphs and sympathizing with their childish misfortunes." End quote. It was during this time that Petyr became infatuated with Catelyn Tully. Catelyn was notably beautiful even in her youth. She possessed the auburn hair and blue eyes of the Tullys. It seemed Petyr would have done anything for her. Catelyn recalls one moment during their youth where Petyr rescued her and Lysa from a harrowing ordeal. Quote, "Last night I dreamed of that time Lysa and I got lost while riding back from Seagard. Do you remember? That strange fog came up and we fell behind the rest of the party. Everything was gray and I could not see a foot past the nose of my horse. We lost the road. The branches of the trees were like long, skinny arms reaching out to grab us as we passed. Lysa started to cry, and when I shouted, the fog seemed to swallow the sound. But Petyr knew where we were, and he rode back and found us." End quote. Such a gallant young man, our Petyr Baelish, striding through Silent Hill to rescue two maidens from a terrible fate. His own horse could have come up lame after stumbling over a rock or tripping in a hole. Who would come looking for him? The daughters of the Lord Paramount of the Trident are politically important. Would the son of a lesser lord be worth the risk? No doubt Petyr thought Catelyn would be impressed by his actions on that day. Perhaps she would see him as dashing, daring, and brave. Petyr would have done anything Catelyn asked, including eating dirt. Catelyn thinks back on a time when she and Lysa had Petyr do just that. Quote, "She remembered the godswood, drooping branches heavy with moisture, and the sound of her brother's laughter as he chased her through piles of damp leaves. She remembered making mud pies with Lysa, the weight of them, the mud slick and brown between her fingers. They had served them to Littlefinger, giggling, and he'd eaten so much mud he was sick for a week. How young they all had been." End quote. How young, how foolish, how gross. I'm certain Petyr ate those dirt pies rather than tell Catelyn no. I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. But telling her no would potentially risk upsetting her, and Petyr would not risk that. Some people erroneously believe that the best way to impress a potential mate is by demonstrating you will do anything to please them. This is a mistake. Never do this. It is okay to establish boundaries. It is okay to say no. You do not have to eat dirt for a love interest in hopes that they will like you. Often, this kind of groveling behavior has the exact opposite effect. Giving too much attention and affection can be off-putting. Simone de Beauvoir once wrote, "The knight departing for new adventures offends his lady, yet she has nothing but contempt for him if he remains at her feet. This is the torture of impossible love." So don't be so quick to bend the knee. This is why pickup artists teach in their scam classes that men should withhold attention, play with the mind of the woman they want, appear interested, then pull back suddenly. Keep them confused. Now, there is a certain truth to this. You don't want to be Littlefinger eating dirt pies. But pickup artists take things too far. Instead of encouraging men and young boys to be slightly mysterious and not overly available, they teach them to play mind games. This isn't seduction, it's manipulation. As it happens, Petyr acting like a complete simp for Catelyn did not cause her to like him more. Catelyn viewed Petyr as a brother, but if she saw Petyr as family, Petyr was on that Targaryen time. Catelyn tells Sir Roderick in Book 1 about Petyr's affections for her. Quote, Sir Roderick cleared his throat. Lord Baelish once... His thought trailed off uncertainly in search of the polite word. Catelyn was past delicacy. He was my father's ward. We grew up together in Riverrun. I thought of him as a brother, but his feelings for me were more than brotherly. When it was announced I was to wed Brandon Stark, Petyr challenged for the right to my hand. It was madness. Brandon was 20, Petyr scarcely 15. I had to beg Brandon to spare Petyr's life. He left him off with a scar. Afterward, my father sent him away. I have not seen him since. She lifted her face to the spray as if the brisk wind could blow the memories away. He wrote to me at Riverrun after Brandon was killed, but I burned the letter unread. By then I knew that Ned would marry me in his brother's place. End quote. The letter was no doubt Petyr making another effort to marry Catelyn, seizing the opportunity because Brandon just died. Hey, I heard your fiancé died. Do I have a shot now? Is nasty work. Instead of replying, Catelyn put the letter into a fire. This is exactly how Jaime responds to Cersei's desperate letter. Even playing the kissing game with Petyr did not move her to like him. Quote, as she stood there, all the memories came flooding back to her. Her father had taught her to ride amongst these trees, and that was the elm that Edmure had fallen from when he broke his arm. And over there, beneath the bower, she and Lysa had played at kissing with Petyr. She had not thought of that in years. How young they had all been. she no older than Sansa, Lysa younger than Arya, and Petyr younger still, yet eager. The girls had traded him between them, serious and giggling by turns. It came back to her so vividly she could almost feel his sweaty fingers on her shoulders and taste the mint on his breath. There was always mint growing in the godswood, and Petyr had liked to chew it. He had been such a bold little boy, always in trouble. He tried to put his tongue in my mouth, Catelyn had confessed to her sister afterward when they were alone. He did with me too, Lysa had whispered, shy and breathless. I liked it. End quote. For Catelyn, the mud pies and kissing game, this was kids being kids. It meant nothing, but for Petyr Baelish, it must have meant everything. The same goes for Lysa. Catelyn might not have developed romantic feelings for her father's ward, but her sister Lysa did. In her youth, Lysa was not the petulant, pudgy woman she is now. Jaime Lannister once spent time at Riverrun. There was hope he might wed Lysa. He remembers young Lysa Tully as a pretty girl, dimpled and delicate, with long auburn hair. Timid though, prone to tongue-tied silences and fits of giggles, with none of Cersei's fire. Her older sister had seemed more interesting. It would appear Jaime has a thing for strong women. Jaime saw Lysa as timid. This timidity suggests an innocent nature, one that could easily be manipulated. Lysa loved Petyr, but Petyr loved Catelyn, and Catelyn did not love Petyr. Can you call it a love triangle if none of the points meet? There are two controversies that stain the history of Petyr's time at Riverrun, the first being Lysa's deflowering and pregnancy. There came a time that the Lords Bracken and Blackwood came to Riverrun to lay the perpetual feud before their liege lord. A feast was held to welcome or perhaps to placate the two troublesome lords. During this event, Hoster Tully was too busy attending to his vassals to pay close attention to his children and ward. There was much dancing and merrymaking at the dinner. Petyr danced with Catelyn several times. Lysa took note of this. There was also much drinking as well. Even the children partook, since there was no one there to stop them. Young Edmure got drunk. Emboldened by the alcohol, Petyr attempted to kiss Catelyn, but she pushed him away, laughing as she did so. Lysa took note of this as well. She would later say Petyr looked so wounded by this rejection, she thought her heart might burst. Perhaps the laugh was to take the sting out of the refusal without causing too much offense. Or perhaps it was Catelyn's genuine reaction to Petyr's attempt at romance. Catelyn had every right to laugh in the face of an unwanted advancement. Lysa seems to think Catelyn's reaction was cruel, as if Catelyn should have taken Petyr's feelings more into consideration over her own. Regardless, this rejection caused Petyr to get blackout drunk to drown his sorrows. Brynden Blackfish carried Petyr to his bedchamber after he passed out. Lady Lysa explains what happened next. Quote, "That was the night I stole up to his bed to give him comfort. I bled, but it was the sweetest hurt. He told me he loved me then, but he called me cat just before he fell back to sleep. Even so, I stayed with him until the sky began to lighten. Your mother did not deserve him. She would not even give him her favor to wear when he fought Brandon Stark. I would have given him my favor. I gave him everything. He is mine now, not Catelyn's and not yours." End quote. In his drunken state, Petyr confused Lysa with Catelyn. He even calls her by her sister's name. This is very similar to how Robert Baratheon drunkenly called Cersei Lyanna on the night of their bedding. We often see certain events repeat over the course of the series. This reinforces themes and reminds us that history has a cyclical nature. Petyr slept with Lysa, not Catelyn, on that night, but Petyr has been telling people he has slept with both sisters. Is Petyr lying on purpose, or does he genuinely believe his story? It could very well be Petyr believes he slept with both sisters. Petyr did call Lysa by the wrong name. Being so drunk could have left him with a false memory, but the details afterward don't really support this. Because if Petyr really thought he slept with Catelyn, I imagine he would have mentioned it to her later. She was the one thing he so desperately wanted. After rejecting him for so long, she finally came to him, and not only that, she initiated sex. There would be no containing his emotions for days after. Petyr would flash her knowing smiles, make intimate gestures. He would attempt a second sexual encounter. I believe Petyr would have pulled Catelyn aside and whispered in her ear about their supposed sexual encounter. Catelyn would have quickly corrected him, or she would have taken the matter to her Lord Father and told him Petyr was spreading calumnies about her. It doesn't stand to reason that young Petyr actually thought he slept with Catelyn but never decided to mention it to her. Not even on the day he dueled Brandon. He keeps it a secret until he goes to court at King's Landing, where he tells everyone what allegedly happened. I believe Petyr knows he is lying, but why? He's lying because the lie tarnishes Catelyn's reputation while making Petyr look good in the eyes of people that care about such things. He deflowered not one, but two maidens, sisters even. Quite the conquest. This is the boasting of a callow boy. The only way Petyr can claim Catelyn is with a disgusting lie. The lie gives the reader and Catelyn Stark reasons to doubt Petyr's trustworthiness, because so far, to her and to us, he's been nothing but helpful. He's antagonized Ned and acted suspicious, but he's yet to do anything particularly villainous. Catelyn considers Petyr something like a brother, but her so-called brother has been lying about her all these years. Catelyn is unaware of these lies. Tyrion has to tell her about them when they are en route to the Eyrie. Quote,
Tyrion cocked his head. Why, every man at court has heard him tell how he took your maidenhead, my lady. That is a lie, Catelyn Stark said.
End quote. By this point, Catelyn has already visited King's Landing. She has already met with Petyr. She has put her trust in him. She has believed everything he told her. It was Petyr that told her the cat's paw dagger once belonged to Tyrion Lannister. That is why Catelyn arrested him at the inn at the crossroads, an action which roused Lord Tywin Lannister from Casterly Rock to set the Riverlands afire. If Petyr is a liar, if Petyr has been disrespecting Catelyn behind her back, did she make a mistake in trusting him? This is a lie that has no major benefit for Petyr to tell. It offers him no tangible profit, but it gives us insight to him as a character. Catelyn Stark meant a lot to him, and she still does. This shows us that Petyr's mind is still firmly stuck in the past. Petyr never got to marry Catelyn. He is not the father of her children. No doubt this has bothered him over the years. He wants to have been part of her love life, or at least part of her sex life. With this lie, Petyr is claiming ownership over Catelyn. He is treating her as a conquest. He is telling the world he has had her in a way that even her own lord husband will never experience. Quote, there was a time when Cat was all I wanted in this world. I dared to dream of the life we might make and the children she would give me. But she was a daughter of Riverrun and Hoster Tully. Family, duty, honor, Sansa. Family, duty, honor meant I could never have her hand. But she gave me something finer, a gift a woman can give but once. How can I turn my back upon her daughter? End quote. There is absolutely no reason to tell Sansa, hey, I had sex with your mom. Petyr simply can't stop telling this story. What is wrong with him? Perhaps he's told it so much that he's beginning to believe the lie. This whole poetic paragraph about Catelyn is Petyr saying she may have married another, but I hit it first. It's not she loved me, but we could never be together. It's I had sex with her first. Petyr holds on to this thought as a trophy. Bragging at court about taking Catelyn's virginity only serves to feed his ego. No doubt it also serves to placate his anger. He might not have married Catelyn, but at least in his mind, he got to have sex with her first. No one is likely to be impressed by this. Petyr telling every man at court he slept with Catelyn is just cringe. No one likes being around that one person that tells that one story over and over again. Telling the same story over and over again for years shows how important that night meant for Petyr. It's the best thing that's ever happened to him, and it didn't even happen. And you have to wonder, why doesn't he have any other stories of sexual conquest to share? It's been years. In a sense, Petyr peaked at Riverrun. He might be rising high in the world politically, but he's still stuck at Riverrun. There are many characters that hold old grudges. A major theme in this series is reckoning with the past. Tywin Lannister's first mission after becoming Lord was to address old slights done to House Lannister. Walder Frey and Stannis Baratheon continuously complain about old injustices done to them. The Blackwoods and the Brackens have feuded for years, yet who knows why or how it started. The others themselves are a blast from the past. They are here to continue a conflict thousands of years old. Petyr too has his own issues from the past he has not gotten over. Lysa becomes pregnant from sleeping with Petyr. This angers her father Hoster. Being unwed and pregnant is not only seen as sinful, but the shame can damage a house's reputation. Lysa's pregnancy is kept hidden. Not even Catelyn, her own sister, knew of it. Lysa was given moon tea to abort the pregnancy against her knowledge. Lysa confesses this to Petyr when he interrupts her attack on Sansa at the end of Book 3. Quote, "I would have given you a son too, but they murdered him with moon tea, with tansy and mint and wormwood, a spoon of honey and a drop of pennyroyal. It wasn't me. I never knew. I only drank what father gave me." End quote. In this society, women, especially highborn women, are expected to maintain their virtue until such a time as they are married. At the very least, they need to maintain the belief they are still virgins. And people might start to suspect a woman is lying about being a virgin if she becomes pregnant. Catelyn only learns of the pregnancy from cryptic words her father utters in pain while he writhes dying in his bedchamber throughout Book 3. Quote, "Her father's hands clutched at hers, fluttering like two frightened white birds. That stripling, wretched boy, not speak that name to me, your duty. Your mother, she would." Lord Hoster cried as a spasm of pain washed over him. "Oh, gods, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. My medicine." End quote. The wretched stripling was Petyr Baelish. The guilt Hoster feels is for what he did to his own daughter. Lysa was never the same after the forced abortion. Hoster had her quickly married off to Jon Arryn, an elderly lord with no heir of his own. Lysa had proved to be fertile, and Jon Arryn wanted an heir. The forced abortion appears to have done long-term damage to Lysa Tully's body. She endured many miscarriages and stillbirths during her marriage to Jon Arryn. She has only managed to produce one son for him, the heir he so desperately wanted, a boy named Robert. The boy has been sickly all his life, mayhaps due to his father's old age at conception. His seed was not very strong. Or his ill health could be due to the harm the moon tea caused to Lysa Arryn's reproductive system. Or it could be a matter of both. There are theories that Sweet Robin, as I prefer to call him, is in fact Petyr's son, but I disagree. Martin typically leaves hints when there is a paternal mystery. Oftentimes, the children's looks are called into question. Cersei's bastards look like Lannisters with their gold hair and green eyes. Meanwhile, all Baratheons have jet black hair and blue eyes. Rhaenyra's bastards don't have Valyrian features like her or her husband Laenor. There seems to always be something to connect the children to their true father. Lysa confesses a lot of things in her rant at the end of Book 3. She airs everything out, but she never mentions the idea Sweet Robin might be Petyr's son. The second controversy that Petyr caused at River Run would be the last, and that is the duel with Brandon Stark. Catelyn was betrothed to Brandon Stark, the heir of Winterfell. Brandon's father Rickard had Southron ambitions, and this marriage was part of realizing those ambitions. Petyr, like the underdog from a song or story, challenged Brandon to a duel for Catelyn's hand. It did not go well. Catelyn recalls the duel. Quote, "He is only a foolish boy, but I have loved him like a brother. It would grieve me to see him die." And her betrothed looked at her with the cool gray eyes of a Stark and promised to spare the boy who loved her. "Yield!" he called more than once, but Petyr would only shake his head and fight on, grimly. When the river was lapping at their ankles, Brandon finally ended it with a brutal backhand cut that bit through Petyr's rings and leather into the soft flesh below the ribs, so deep that Catelyn was certain the wound was mortal. He looked at her as he fell and murmured, "Cat," as the bright blood came flowing out between his mailed fingers. She thought she had forgotten that. End quote. Petyr fell with the woman's name on his lips, Catelyn's, the same way Rhaegar fell in the trident, whispering the name of his love, the Lady Lyanna. I understand some take this as a clue Petyr is also involved in prophecy, that he has been looking for his own queen of love and beauty, the same way Rhaegar did. As I've said earlier in this video, I do not believe Petyr is involved in magical matters. He's not playing with prophecy. I believe his motives are more mundane. Mostly, I think he's after revenge. Catelyn says, "He is only a foolish boy, but I have loved him like a brother." This is yet another instance of Catelyn saying Petyr was like a brother to her. Please take note. This may seem like a very small detail, but it is very important to remember. With the duel done, Petyr's time at River Run was over. We are not told if Petyr and Edmure were close as children, but it would seem they did get along. It was Edmure that gave Petyr his nickname Littlefinger, a little bit of childish teasing. It seems they got along, at least until the duel. Quote, "A fortnight passed before Littlefinger was strong enough to leave River Run, but her lord father forbade her to visit him in the tower where he lay abed. Lysa helped their maester nurse him. She had been softer and shyer in those days. Edmure had called on him as well, but Petyr had sent him away. Her brother had acted as Brandon's squire at the duel, and Littlefinger would not forgive that. As soon as he was strong enough to be moved, Lord Holster Tully sent Petyr Baelish away in a closed litter to finish his healing on the fingers upon the windswept jut of rock where he had been born." End quote. Being cast back to that desolate shore after suffering a great shame, wounded in more ways than one. This, as they say, was the beginning of his villain arc. This is where Petyr ends and Littlefinger begins. After his defeat, bitterness and bile boiled inside him. The love of his life stood beside the man that nearly killed him. She even gave Brandon her favor before the duel. Edmure, Littlefinger's own foster brother, even squired for Brandon. The Tullys had aligned against him. Edmure's role was nothing but a formality. It wasn't personal, but the whole event was deeply personal for Littlefinger. To Littlefinger, this was betrayal. So when Edmure attempts to see Littlefinger while he's recovering, Littlefinger sends him away. If Edmure wanted to be Brandon's squire, then Edmure can go visit Brandon. Littlefinger did not have time for him. As I mentioned, Littlefinger did write to Catelyn once he learned that Brandon died. She never replied. Catelyn's marriage was an arranged marriage, not one for love, but there's something disgusting and desperate about reaching out to your newly single love interest, hoping there still might be a chance. Because, you know, your competition is now dead as hell. At least pretend to honor a mourning period. Brandon died in King's Landing, executed by the order of the Mad King. Catelyn would then go on to wed his brother Eddard and give him 5 children. Catelyn put Littlefinger out of her heart. She may have loved him in a fashion, but only as a foster brother. a place closer than friend but far from lover, a place more commonly known as the friend zone. If the Twilight Zone is the 5th dimension, then the 6th dimension must be the friend zone. Autozone is the 7th. The friend zone is a dreaded place, one colder than the lands of always winter, a realm ruled by knights kings, corpse queens, and those that identify between the two. Most people don't choose to go to the friend zone on their own. Rather, it is a place that people are banished to, and the darkest corner of the friend zone is a place where you're not just considered a friend, you are considered a sibling. It's like the Olive Garden. When you're here, you're family. And just like the Olive Garden, this place is hopeless. This is why Catelyn calling Littlefinger a brother is so devastating. It means that no matter how many dirt pies he ate, he never stood a chance. After the incident in Book 1 with the assassin and his dagger, Catelyn journeys to King's Landing to warn Ned. There, she is briefly reunited with Littlefinger. He offers to help her and Ned solve their mystery as best he can, never revealing that the mystery is one of his own design. Quote, Catelyn went to him and took his hands in her own. I will not forget the help you gave me, Petyr. When your men came for me, I did not know whether they were taking me to a friend or an enemy. I have found you more than a friend. I have found a brother I'd thought lost. Petyr Baelish smiled. I am desperately sentimental, sweet lady. Best not tell anyone. I have spent years convincing the court I am wicked and cruel, and I should hate to see all that hard work go for naught. End quote. More than a friend, a brother she thought she lost. He never stood a chance in all 7 hells. Littlefinger isn't the only character who has been friend-zoned in such a devastating fashion. Ser Jorah Mormont begins to lust after Daenerys Targaryen following the death of her husband, Khal Drogo. Jorah has mentioned Dany looks very much like his ex-wife, Lanice Hightower. Jorah's desire for Daenerys causes him to be overprotective of her. He mistrusts all the people that begin to flock to her once the birth of her dragons becomes known. As a member of her Queen's Guard, the only member of her Queen's Guard, it is his duty to be wary of anyone that might cause his queen harm. However, Dany becomes weary of his overbearing nature. Quote, Pyat Pre's a liar, Zaro's a schemer, Belwas a braggart, Arstan an assassin. Do you think I'm still some virgin girl that cannot hear the words behind the words? Your Grace, she bowled over him. You have been a better friend to me than any I have known, a better brother than Viserys ever was. You are the first of my Queen's Guard, the commander of my army, my most valued counselor, my right good hand. I honor and respect and cherish you, but I do not desire you, Jorah Mormont, and I am weary of your trying to push every other man in the world away from me, so I must needs rely on you and you alone. It will not serve, and it will not make me love you any better. Mormont had flushed red when she first began, but by the time Dany was done, his face was pale again. He stood as still as stone. If my queen commands, he said, curt and cold. End quote. A better brother than Viserys ever was. Words that cut deeper than any blade of Valyrian steel ever could. Martin's depiction of this moment feels too real to me. Seems to me he has experienced something like this himself. They say, write what you know, but we'll move past it. You may have witnessed this. You may have experienced this. Person A likes person B, and while they can't have them romantically, they become possessive. They treat the object of their affection like property, something they own that must needs be protected. Person A tries to isolate person B. They push away any potential suitors in hopes this will increase their chance of being chosen. This is a terrible way of going about things. It's manipulative. It's predatory. Think of an animal marking its territory. If not checked properly, this behavior can escalate. It can become dangerous. Because one way to take total ownership of another person's existence is by killing them. If I can't have you, no one will. Daenerys sees what Jorah is doing and puts an end to it. Some people never come to realize they are being isolated, that their attempts at finding romance or making other meaningful connections are being sabotaged. They may feel like they're powerless to stop it from happening. In either case, the end result might be a person that feels the only romantic option left to them is the person that has isolated them. They accept defeat and give in. Once Daenerys banishes Ser Jorah, he ends up in Sohoris, where one day he visits a brothel. He attempts to fill the hole in his heart with a sex slave that looks like Daenerys. This is how Illyrio Mopatis dealt with his desires for Daenerys. Like Ser Jorah, Dany reminded him of his previous wife, a girl from Lys called Sarah. Illyrio had considered taking Dany as his own wife, but decided against it. Instead, he took out his lust on a sex slave with similar features as Dany. This is what Petyr Littlefinger Baelish is trying to do with Sansa, but we will get to that in a moment. The reason I bring up pickup artist and the friend zone is because these are topics often discussed by people that call themselves incels. People that are involuntarily celibate. They would like some sex, but no one is willing to give it to them. Littlefinger is not an incel in the strictest sense, but he has some traits you can find among those that classify themselves as such. Littlefinger is described as short and slender. He's not a tall, imposing man. His physique is not impressive. He's very unassuming. We are not told if he is particularly attractive. Nothing about him draws the eye. Incels often complain about their looks, how they lost the genetic lottery. Height is one of the major causes of concern among incels because they believe girls prefer men that are taller than average. They also believe girls are attracted to wealth. Littlefinger was born both short and poor, the heir to a house with no great lands or legacy. Unimpressive. Incels also have a sense of entitlement when it comes to women. Sex is something owed to them simply for existing. This is where Littlefinger relates most to incels. He has a sense of entitlement toward a certain woman in particular, Catelyn Stark. This sense of entitlement now extends to her daughter, Sansa. Now we must needs briefly talk about the idea of alpha and beta males. It was once believed wolf packs were led by a male known as the alpha, the largest and strongest of them all. The alpha gets all the good food and sleeps with all the female wolves. One of the lowest forms in the wolf pack is the beta, the tail, the weakest male of the group. However, in the years since the study was released, the scientist that came up with the idea of alpha and beta wolves has denounced his work. He was wrong. He made observations based on captive wolf packs, not wild ones. Captive species of animals do not behave as they would in the wild. The alpha-beta wolf is a myth, just like Stockholm Syndrome. But just like Stockholm Syndrome, the idea has jumped from pseudoscience into the realm of pop culture. And just like Stockholm Syndrome, people still push the idea that alpha and beta males are real concepts even after science has said otherwise. They believe in pecking orders where there are super strong guys on top and lesser guys on the bottom. This is the natural order of things, even among humans. The alphas are the leaders. They do all the fucking. The betas are the weak of society. They don't get to have the sex. A song of soy boys and chads. Silly pseudoscience, but here we are. If these concepts were real, Littlefinger is what one would consider a beta male, especially compared to Brandon Stark, who would be seen as an alpha. I mean, just look at the sigil of his house. Littlefinger could never hope to compete with a Brandon. Because they lack in so many areas, incels plot and scheme other ways to get what they desire. The world might mock them now, but one day they'll see. One day they'll all see. They might be viewed as weak betas now, but one day they will rise. And when they rise, they will make the world regret. The saying goes, living well is the best revenge, but living well is not enough for these types of people. It is not enough for them to win. For them to win, others must lose. Part 2. The Stand. Murder is the method of revenge chosen by Harold Lauder, a character from Stephen King's novel, The Stand. In King's epic tale, what he considers to be his Lord of the Rings, the world is devastated by a man-made plague codenamed 848-AB, also known as the Blue Virus, the Superflu, or Captain Trips. The virus was developed in a lab somewhere in the Mojave Desert, Death Valley, the land that God had forsaken. Due to a series of cascading failures, the virus contaminates the lab. All the scientists and soldiers stationed there become infected. One soldier flees with his wife and infant daughter before the facility can be placed on total lockdown. The family of 3 quickly succumb to the virus. From them, the virus explodes across America and then the world. Only those born with a natural immunity survive. Harold Lauder is one such person. He is around 16 years old when he enters the story. He is not very popular in his hometown or even in his own home. People are repulsed by him. Yes, even members of his own family. Harold is described as being overweight with severe acne. He has almost no social skills. When he does engage in conversation, he has a very insufferable manner of speaking. He wants to be taken as an intellectual, but he comes across as condescending and pedantic. Harold has terrible hygiene. His sister is disgusted by his tendency to masturbate directly in his underwear without changing them afterward. His terrible hygiene is why his hair is described as black and greasy. Harold is involuntarily celibate, an incel. There is only one other survivor in his town, a young woman named Frances Goldsmith. Harold likes Franny, but the feeling is not mutual. For one, Franny had a boyfriend before the plague. She is pregnant with their child at the start of the story. Franny's boyfriend was not happy to learn she was pregnant, and he had said some not so supportive things when she told him. The story takes place in the 1970s, and they were not married. Things were different back then. Their situationship almost doesn't matter because Franny's boyfriend was not immune to Captain Trips. Neither were Franny's parents. The point is that Franny had more important things to worry about than romance when the plague wiped out humanity, leaving her and Harold the only 2 people left in their town. Romance was the first thing on Harold's mind when he realized Franny was still alive. Franny was also an adult in her early 20s at the start of the story, not a teenager like Harold. Franny pitied Harold. She was friends with his sister. She heard the details of his private life. Pity is the death of desire. She pitied Harold, but she too was repulsed by him. She notices Harold watches all her movements lecherously. Quote, she sensed by low-grade telepathy that almost every thought Harold had was coated lightly with slime. End quote. Harold never thought he had a chance with Franny, but the plague changed everything. Harold realizes he and she might be the last 2 people on Earth, Adam and Eve. Of course she must turn to him. What other choice does she have? There's an alarming number of men that believe women should not have a choice in what partner they have, that they should be assigned to men, and now through divine intervention or the intervention of that other guy, Franny does not have a choice. She must be Harold's. Which is why Harold is highly upset when he and Franny encounter other survivors. One of them being a man named Stuart Redman. Stu is everything Harold is not. He's a man grown, for one, not a teenager. Stu is not socially inept. Stu is confident. Stu is experienced. Stu is fit and attractive. Harold is immediately threatened by his presence. Quote, "You stay away!" Harold screamed angrily at him, and his hand fell onto the butt of the gun again. Stu put his hand on top of Harold's as if they were playing slapjack. He put his other hand on Harold's arm. Harold's eyes were very wide, and Stu believed he was only an inch or so from becoming dangerous. He wasn't just jealous of the girl. That had been a bad oversimplification on his part. His personal dignity was wrapped up in it, his new image of himself as the girl's protector. God knew what kind of fuck-up he had been before all of this, with his wad of a belly and his pointy-toed boots and his stuck-up way of talking. But underneath the new image was the belief he was still a fuck-up and always would be. Underneath was the certainty that there was no such thing as a fresh start. He would have reacted the same way to Bateman or to a 12-year-old kid. In any triangle situation, he was going to see himself as the lowest point. End quote. Harold viewed the plague as a chance to start over. Everyone that knew the person he was now dead, Franny excluded. Harold could invent for himself a new identity. He can change. He can be someone else beside the repulsive outcast. The sad thing is, Harold did not change, and he can't hide who he was. Even someone like Stu, a complete stranger to him, can immediately see that. Stu's presence heightens Harold's pre-existing insecurities. This causes Harold to become overly protective of Franny. A better word would be possessive. Harold's fear is that Franny will become romantically interested in Stu, so he tries to isolate her, to put walls around her. She is his and no one else's. And he will use violence if necessary. Stu manages to defuse the situation during their initial encounter, but Harold remains on edge. Over the course of the story, Harold's fears do come true. Franny and Stu do begin a romantic relationship. Try as he might, Harold is unable to seduce Franny. Franny, Stu, Harold, and their band of survivors are drawn to the presence of an ancient black woman called Mother Abigail Fremantle. They have all witnessed her in their dreams. Survivors from all over America journey to be by her side. She is God's chosen. Mother Abigail is a growing light in this new, uncertain world, but there is a growing darkness as well. And this darkness is drawing people to it, just as Mother Abigail draws people to her. Stu Redman dreams of this growing darkness. Quote, "A cloud came over the sun. He began to be afraid. He began to feel that there was something terrible, something worse than plague, fire, or earthquake. Something was in the corn, and it was watching him. Something dark was in the corn. He looked and saw two burning eyes, far back in the shadows, far back in the corn. Those eyes filled him with the paralyzed, hopeless horror that the hen feels for the weasel. Him, he thought, the man with no face. Oh dear God, no." End quote. Far off in the land of Las Vegas dwells another power, a rival to Mother Abigail. This power also appears in the dreams of survivors, beckoning them to be by his side. This is Randall Flagg, a man of many forms and names, the man in black, the dark man, the walking dude, and perhaps he who walks behind the rose. Randall Flagg appeals to the darkness in the hearts of people. Everyone has a little darkness in them, to be sure, but Flagg is the beacon for those that choose to embrace their inner darkness, the shameless sinners. Flagg's kingdom is literally in Sin City. In this post-apocalyptic world, his community promises peace, order, and technological advancement, but it is also authoritarian, punishing. It is run partly on slave labor. The executed are often crucified, their bodies displayed along the roadsides leading into the city. Mother Abigail's community settles in Boulder, Colorado, in a residential neighborhood full of abandoned houses. Their community is democratic, relatively peaceful. The people of Boulder aren't free of sin, but they strive to do good in the world. They strive to overcome their inner darkness, though not all of them are successful. Mother Abigail and Randall are not just opposites. Flagg sees her and her community as a rival to his own power. As such, he would see her and her people destroyed. Harold has not overcome his inner darkness. He has old grudges that weigh heavy on his soul. He suffers from deep resentment. This holds him back from being a better person. Harold does have something of a glow-up in the Colorado community. He loses weight. He bathes regularly. He dresses better. He even gets a cool nickname, Hawk. This improvement of himself is partly inspired by his decision to get revenge. He wants to get back at the likes of Stu, Franny, and the rest of the survivors who took him lightly. The changes Harold made could have worked wonders for his mental health if he had done it for himself. Self-improvement is meant for the self. Harold hides his true feelings by being overly genial, everybody's friend, a threat to no one. The book tells us Harold smiled, Harold grinned, Harold positively radiated good cheer. It's all fake, an act. Harold also hides his ill intent by being ever so helpful. Quote, Harold could grin until his face cracked and slap people on the back and pass the time of day with folks. He could and did gladly offer his help whenever it was asked for, and sometimes when it wasn't. He could and did make people like him, and it was a fact that he was highly regarded in Boulder. End quote. In The Stand, Franny comes to suspect something is off about Harold, but she could never have imagined just what Harold had in mind, nor the dark powers with which he has aligned himself. Franny and Stu have a conversation about Harold's behavior. Quote, it's the truth. Anyway, I think he still holds what I said against me. He never says a mean word against you, Stu, or anybody. No, Stu agreed. He smiles. That's what I don't like. You don't think he's plotting revenge or anything? Stu smiled and stood up. No, not Harold. Glenn thinks the opposition party may just end up coming together around Harold. That's okay. I just hope he doesn't try to fuck up what we're doing now. Just remember that he's scared and lonely and jealous. Jealous? She considered it, then shook her head. I don't think so. I really don't. I've talked to him and I think I'd know. End quote. Stu senses Harold is jealous. Franny senses something is amiss. Both are right in their own way, but they downplay what is going on because Harold is, well, Harold. How dangerous can he be? Another character, a young boy named Leo, sees straight through Harold's smiles. Leo is a child, and it is believed children are perceptive of such things. Fictional stories often play this up as if it's a sixth sense or even a magical ability. But this is a Stephen King story, which means Leo does have a magical ability. He has a bit of the shine in him. All the survivors do, hence the psychic visions they received. Leo's gift is quite strong. When Larry Underwood, an adoptive father figure to Leo, asks him how he feels about Harold, Leo simply says, scared. In the Boulder community, Harold lives in a remote house with the windows shuttered. No one else in town lives like this. Because it used to be that a house with all the windows shuttered was a sign the house had dead plague victims inside. This, I think, is a way of showing us that Harold is dead and rotting inside. Larry asks Leo why Harold might live like this, to which Leo replies, so nobody can see in, I guess, so he can do secret things. Maybe he's praying to the Dark Man. Throughout the story, Harold, like so many others, strays the line between darkness and light. Once the plague eradicated humanity, Harold was filled with so much hope, which was an early sign there was something wrong with him. How can you feel joy at the deaths of billions of people? Harold never fit in with the old world. Now there was a new one, and he could be anything. But Harold was also filled with fear. Fear that someone would discover the truth about Harold of the old world. Fear that someone would take Franny from him. Both those fears came true. Harold's fear made him angry. He let his anger fester, and it filled him with hate. With his windows shuttered, Harold would sit huddled in his house, alone, dwelling on his hatred. His hatred caused him to suffer. Harold walked away from the light and fell deep into darkness. The man in black sensed the darkness in Harold. Through strange green dreams that neither you nor I can comprehend, he reached out to him, finding in Harold an acolyte. Leo, with his gift, sensed the connection between Harold and the man in black. When Larry asks Leo if he truly believes Harold is capable of such things, Leo says, quote, I don't know, but he's not like us. He smiles a lot, but I think there might be worms inside him. making him smile, big white worms eating up his brain like maggots, end quote. The character Nadine, Leo's adoptive mother figure, is also perceptive of Harold's darker nature. Quote, Nadine could understand why Harold smiled as much as he did, because when he stopped, he looked insane. She suspected that he was insane, or very nearly, end quote.
You might want to save your screaming for someone who will actually hear it!
It is possible Nadine could sense Harold's darkness because she has a darkness of her own. She too has become aligned with the man in black. He sends Nadine to be Harold's companion, his sexual plaything. The man in black treats her as a whore. He uses her as a sexual token for Harold, an object of temptation. The man in black allows Harold to sleep with Nadine, but only orally and anally. Because Nadine must remain a virgin, she can be despoiled in other ways, but not like that. The man in black has further plans for her in that regard. At this point in the story, Harold is fit. He is considered attractive. He is somewhat respected in the community. He is called Hawk. Yet he still holds hatred in his heart. He hides his hatred with a smile. Harold smiles because he has a plan, a grand plan, one that involves murder. The residents of Boulder plan to hold a community gathering. In the most recent TV show adaptation, it is a candlelight vigil. In either case, many of the residents make an appearance. However, at the house where the gathering is being held, Harold Lauder has placed a bomb. No one at the gathering suspects anything, so Harold Lauder's plan for revenge succeeds. Harold and Nadine flee the town by motorcycle after the explosion. The man in black, having no further use of Harold, uses his abilities to reach out and influence Harold to have an accident. Harold's injuries are devastating but not immediately fatal. He is unable to walk. Nadine, having secretly despised Harold this whole time, leaves him for dead. To his very end, people were still repulsed by Harold. After days of suffering and agony and ruminating on his actions, Harold comes to realize he wasted his second chance at life. He writes a long, detailed journal entry explaining his actions, hoping for forgiveness. Quote, I apologize for all the destructive things I have done, but do not deny that I did them of my own free will. On my school papers, I always signed my name, Harold Emery Lauder. I signed my manuscripts, poor things that they were, the same way. God help me, I once wrote it on the roof of a barn in letters 3 feet high. I want to sign this by a name given me in Boulder. I could not accept it then, but I take it freely now. I am going to die in my right mind. Writing neatly at the bottom, he affixed his signature. Hawk. End quote. Revenge was not as rewarding as he anticipated. It was not the start of something more. Harold thought he would go to Sin City to start a new life. Harold always saw other people as being the problem, but the problem wasn't other people. The problem was Harold. In the end, revenge consumed him. There was nothing to be done. So once he was done writing his last journal entry, Harold placed the barrel of the gun he had in his mouth. Quote, he thought of a game they had played when they were children, a game the others had teased him about because he never quite dared to go through with it. There was a gravel pit out on one of the back roads, and you could jump off the edge and fall a heart-stopping distance before hitting the sand, rolling over and over, and finally climbing up to do it all over again. All except Harold. Harold would stand on the lip of the drop and chant, 1, 2, 3, just like the others. But the talisman never worked. His legs remained locked. He could not bring himself to jump. And the others sometimes chased him home, shouting at him, calling Harold the pansy. He thought, If I could have brought myself to jump once, just once, I might not be here. Well, last time pays for all. He thought 1, 2, 3. He pulled the trigger. The gun went off. Harold jumped. End quote. Harold Lauder's smile was a mask. He used this mask to hide his true intentions, his true feelings. He used it to mask the hatred he felt inside. Now recall Sansa Stark's first encounter with Littlefinger. Quote, when Sansa finally looked up, a man was standing over her, staring. He was short, with a pointed beard and a silver streak in his hair, almost as old as her father. You must be one of her daughters, he said to her. He had gray-green eyes that did not smile when his mouth did. End quote. This is a common trope in stories, the false smile, the smile that never reaches the eyes. It is a not-so-subtle clue by the writer that the smile is fake. Someone is being deceptive. Real smiles animate a person's entire face. Eyes crinkle, foreheads wrinkle. It is not always just an upward curve of the lips. Smiling and being helpful, that is how Littlefinger rises to power. Here is a quote from George R.R. Martin about the difference between the show version of the character and the book version.
But book Littlefinger and television show Littlefinger are very different characters. They're probably the character that's most different from the book to the television show. There was a line in a recent episode of the show where he's not even present, but two people are talking about him, and someone says, well, no one trusts Littlefinger, and Littlefinger has no friends. And that's true of television show Littlefinger, but it's certainly not true of book Littlefinger. If book Littlefinger in the book, everybody trusts him. Everybody trusts him because he seems powerless, and he's very friendly, and he's very helpful. He helps Ned Stark when he comes to town. He helps Tyrion, he helps the Lannisters. He's always ready to help, to raise money. He helps Robert. Robert depends on him to finance all of his banquets and tournaments and his other follies, because Littlefinger can always raise money. So he's everybody's friend. But of course, there's the Machiavellian thing. He's, everybody trusts him, everybody depends on him. He's not a threat. He's just this helpful, funny guy who you can, call upon to do whatever you want and to raise money. And he ingratiates himself with people and rises higher and higher as a result.
This is exactly what Harold Lauder does in The Stand. Yes, some people had reservations about him, but he was generally well received in the Boulder community. The whole time, his personal persona was a lie. The deep dive into Harold Lauder's history in The Stand serves two purposes. For one, it is a backdoor pilot. Eventually, we will run out of A Song of Ice and Fire history and lore to discuss. Without more books, it's inevitable, and I will have to pivot to other projects or else abandon the channel entirely. The Stand is one of my favorite King novels. This was an opportunity for me to see if I could do a deep dive on something not A Song of Ice and Fire related. The second purpose is to demonstrate Littlefinger is a type of character we have seen before. Don't focus too much on the financial crimes, his debt schemes, or any other magical motives. Littlefinger is the nerd who grew up with a chip on his shoulder. He is the meme of the nerd in school that was ignored by the girls he desired. Those girls chose the bad boys, the thugs, the asshole, not the nice guy. Meanwhile, the nerd stuck to his books and rose high in the world. Now he's rich, successful. Catelyn married another man. She had 5 of his children, but after she faced some trouble, she turned to Littlefinger for his help. But her dire situation was designed by Littlefinger himself. Littlefinger is such a pathetic wretch, he has to create the situation where Catelyn needs him. He is the one that helped bring down Ned. Through his scheming, he helps make Catelyn a single mother alone in the world. I cannot say Catelyn would have lived a long, happy life if Littlefinger did not plot against her family, but her life would have been much different if he had left her alone. He is the shadow that refuses to unattach itself from her life, a kind of parasite. Harold Lauder, Littlefinger, and Theon Greyjoy are very similar characters. They smile, and they plot, and they hold hate on the inside. But Theon was never clever or very competent, so his plan to rise high failed. Harold and Littlefinger are more adept players in the game. We know what Harold's plan was, but what is Littlefinger ultimately up to? Part 3. The Plan. Murder is the method Harold Lauder used to get back at those he despised. Littlefinger has a different, though similar path of revenge. Petyr Littlefinger Baelish may not technically be an incel, but he does possess a similar toxic mindset. His plan is to rise to greatness, to accumulate wealth, to gain status, with a little bit of murder along the way. Littlefinger decided the fingers weren't enough, not nearly enough. The reason he couldn't compete with Brandon Stark wasn't just because he lacked the skill at arms. It was because of his low birth. Brandon was the son of a High Lord, the heir to Winterfell. One day he would be a High Lord. Littlefinger had no such prospects. If Littlefinger wanted to marry a woman of status, he would need to rise to a position of status himself. It would not be easy. This would require long-term plotting and scheming. Littlefinger's first target in his plan was the Lady Lysa. Lysa never lost her love for Littlefinger. She has always been willing to do anything for him. She was Littlefinger's access to power. Littlefinger convinced Lysa to convince Jon Arryn to give him a job. Jon Arryn appointed Littlefinger control of customs in Goldtown, a role he flourished in. He performed the job so well that Jon Arryn convinced King Robert to make him Master of Coin. With 2 great leaps, Littlefinger was now on the small council. Lysa helped to open the door, but it was Littlefinger's natural talent that helped facilitate his rapid rise. Jon Arryn was aware that Lysa was not a maiden when he wed her. He married her because she had proved to be fertile. He knew she had been pregnant before. Catelyn surmises this after listening to her father's tortured confessions over the course of the first few books. Quote, "You made him take her," she whispered. Lysa was the price Jon Arryn had to pay for the swords and spears of House Tully. Small wonder her sister's marriage had been so loveless. The Arryns were proud and prickly of their honor. Lord Jon might wed Lysa to bind the Tullys to the cause of the rebellion and in hopes of a son, but it would have been hard for him to love a woman who came to his bed soiled and unwilling. He would have been kind, no doubt, dutiful, yes, but Lysa needed warmth. End quote. Hoster must not have told Jon Arryn the name of the man who got Lysa pregnant. If he did, it is doubtful Jon Arryn would have trusted that man around his wife. Did Hoster not learn of Littlefinger's new appointments? Surely his maester would have told him. Warning Jon not to trust Littlefinger would have saved his life. Littlefinger was now in a position of influence on the king's small council. He established businesses, amassed wealth. He was also having an affair with Lysa Arryn. It was more than he could have ever hoped for, but it was still not enough. The Tullys rejected him. A Stark nearly killed him. For that, they must be punished. Catelyn Tully Stark most of all. And now I want to discuss very briefly the life and lies of Andrew Tate. His early career was in mixed martial arts and kickboxing. He did a stint on reality TV, but those ventures weren't his claim to fame. Tate claims he rose to power by convincing his girlfriends to become webcam models, virtual sex workers. Tate ran a small empire where he had multiple women performing as models in a house in Romania. He asserts this was a legitimate business, all legal. He admits to taking advantage of desperate men, finessing them out of their money. Since the men did this willingly and the women were also willing participants, Tate believes none of his actions were actually illegal. A brilliant businessman, someone to emulate. However, Tate has since been charged with human trafficking, rape, and forming a criminal gang to sexually exploit women, All of these charges have yet to be proven, and other claims about Tate's businesses are allegations for now, but the evidence is damning. There is video footage of Tate allegedly whipping one of his so-called former girlfriends. Tate may not technically be an incel, but he does share a similar toxic mindset. What these kind of people have in common is rampant misogyny. Women are things to be used for personal gain and nothing more. As part of his rise to power, Littlefinger buys several brothels in King's Landing. He owns other businesses as well, but his brothels are the businesses he is most known for. Despite owning a few, Littlefinger still wants more. He contemplates buying the brothel owned by the Summer Islander Chitaya and her daughter Alayaya. Quote, Chitaya runs a choice establishment, Littlefinger said as they rode. I've half a mind to buy it. Brothels are a much sounder investment than ships I've found. Whores seldom sink, and when they're boarded by pirates, why? The pirates pay good coin like everyone else. Petyr chuckled at his own wit. End quote. Some incels and men of a toxic mindset view all women as whores, things to be used and discarded. It appears Littlefinger has grown to have a similar ideology. He even engages in what we in our real world would call sex trafficking. When it is discovered Jane Poole has been hiding with Sansa Stark in her bedchamber, Queen Cersei commands the girl be removed. Littlefinger agrees to find a place for her, the place being one of his brothels. He does not just hide her there, he makes her service his customers. Slavery is illegal in Westeros, but clearly Jane becomes a sex slave. She bears scars from whippings she received during her time at the brothel. When Tywin Lannister needs a fake Arya Stark, Littlefinger delivers him Jane Poole. She is taken north to serve her new purpose, to be the bride of the bastard Ramsay Snow. And one of the reasons why she suffers is because of Littlefinger. And I am certain he does not care about her suffering or the suffering of any other woman he oversees. Littlefinger stopped having feelings long ago. Alphas don't waste time on things like empathy. Jane Poole can't be the only girl that has been forced to work in his establishments. Littlefinger, as the owner of several brothels, now has many women under his control. Women that can't tell him no. Women that can't deny him like Catelyn Tully did. Elsewise, he can kick them out and send them packing back to whatever place they came from. It is likely these women have nothing. They came from nothing. They may feel that the only thing they have to offer, the only thing they possess of value, is their own bodies. This gives Littlefinger power that he can leverage over them at any time. If they want to argue, if they want to complain, if they want to say no, he can have them whipped or worse. And if they ever truly displease him, then there's the door. Littlefinger desires ultimate control of any woman in his life. If he can't control them, then they are of no use to him. Women are property to be used and discarded. To men like Littlefinger, women are meat. Part 4. The Meathouse Man. In 1973, George R.R. Martin published the short story Meathouse Man. The story is set in the far-off future. The main character of Meathouse Man is a corpse handler by the name of Greg Traeger. Traeger has a rather interesting profession. He is known as a corpse handler. In the world of the story, human corpses are used as slave labor. Corpse handlers use special controllers, mind-body devices that connect them with the corpses so they can manipulate their movements. The best corpse handlers can control several corpses at once for faster, more efficient labor. Traeger is one of the best handlers. He and his fellow corpse handlers work in an ore field on the planet Scraggy. Traeger is a lonely man with few friends and no love interests. On one particular payday, Cox, the eldest corpse handler, insists Traeger join him and a few others for a trip to a local brothel. Traeger is reluctant, But Cox insists all of the workers, if you can call them that, at this brothel are corpses. They are controlled by unseen operators with the same mind-body devices Traeger uses. Though they do not speak or express desire, the corpses respond to physical touch. They can even appear aroused. This is to support the illusion that the user is with an active, willing participant. To sleep with such a corpse is to have sex but without emotion, no connection. This can be tempting for someone so deprived of intimacy with other living humans.
Emboldened, aroused, and hard, the boy stripped off his corpse handler's clothing and climbed in bed with the female meat. He was very excited. His hands shook as he stroked her, studied her. On her huge breasts, all around the fat, dark nipples, the last customer had left tooth marks where he'd chewed her. Then, sheepish about his hesitations, he grabbed one breast, squeezed it hard, pinched the nipple until he imagined a real girl would squeal with pain. The corpse did not move. He rolled over on her and took the other breast into his mouth. And the corpse responded. She thrust up at him, hard, and meaty arms wrapped around his pimpled back to pull him to her. Traeger groaned and reached down between her legs. He trembled. How did they do that? Could she really get excited without a mind? Or did they have lubricating tubes stuck into her? Or what? Then he stopped caring.
If they can't make a genuine connection, perhaps this might be the next best thing. Traeger enjoys several sessions with these corpses. He enjoys the control it provides him. The corpses cannot deny him. They cater to his every wish. He realizes deep down what he is doing is unhealthy, but he cannot stop himself. He lives in conflict with himself. He yearns for a relationship with a living woman, but he can't imagine that ever happening. All that he has are the corpses. There is one woman he falls for, a girl named Josie. Traeger thinks she's beautiful and considers her aggressive, confident, and conquering. He does attempt to make something of it, but he is ultimately unsuccessful in that regard. Quote, "But back home the sureness faded. Then, with awful despair, he knew that he was kidding himself. He was a friend to her, nothing more, never would be more. Why did he lie to himself? He'd had hints enough. They had never been lovers, never would be. On the few times he worked up the courage to touch her, she would smile, move away on some pretext, so he was never quite sure that he was being rejected. But he got the idea, and in the dark it tore at him. He walked the corridors weakly now, sullen, desperate, wanting to talk to someone without knowing how, and all the old scars woke up to bleed again." End quote. There's that word again, friend. Still, this was not an outright rejection. This leaves Traeger with hope, a fool's hope. Later, he confesses his feelings for her once more. He tells her the truth. Quote,
"Josie," he started. He felt so fine, so good, so warm, and it came out. "I love you." And she stopped, pulled away from him, stepped back. Her mouth opened just a little, and something flickered in her eyes. "Oh, Greg," she said, softly, sadly. "No, Greg, no, don't." And she shook her head. Trembling slightly, mouthing silent words, Traeger held out his hand. Josie did not take it. He touched her cheek, gently, and wordless, she spun away from him. Then, for the first time ever, Traeger shook, and the tears came.
End quote. Josie leads Traeger to a room where they talk. The details of the conversation are sparse, perhaps because Traeger, the main character, was too hurt by Josie's rejections to hear all she had to say. Josie tries to encourage him to seek other opportunities. There are 1,000 worlds out there, a wide universe to explore. There is more than Josie and the corpse world. It all ends in tears anyway. Quote,
There, sitting across from each other on the floor, never touching, they talked. Known it for a long time. Tried to discourage you, Greg, but I didn't just want to come right out, and I never wanted to hurt you. A good person. Don't worry. Knew it all along. That it would never. Lied to myself. Wanted to believe, even if it wasn't true. I'm sorry, Josie. I'm sorry. Afraid you would go back to what you were. Don't, Greg. Promise me. Can't give up. Have to believe. Why? Stop believing, then you have nothing. Dead. You can do better. A good handler. Get off Scracky, find something. No life here. Someone. You will. Just believe. Keep on believing. You. Love you forever, Josie. Forever. How can I find someone? Never anyone like you, never. Special. Oh, Greg. Lots of people. Just look. Open. Laughter. Open? First time I ever talked to anyone. Talk to me again if you have to. I can talk to you. Had enough lovers. Everyone wants to get to bed with me. Better just to be friends. Friends. Laughter. Tears.
Josie confesses she has been with many men. It is her right to sleep with whomever she likes. But no doubt Traeger felt hurt to hear that. If she can sleep with others, why not give him a chance? What's so wrong with him if she's had other men? Enough lovers suggest she's had her fair share. So she will sleep with any other guy, but not him? I had to take a step back from the story to question Martin's intent as a writer with this exchange. Martin said he poured a lot of himself into the writing of this story, and that is plainly evident. Martin has been Traeger. He has loved someone that loved him not. I felt Martin was judging Josie, and by extension, the women that rejected him in life, as being somewhat promiscuous. These women will give themselves over to other men, but will draw the line at him. The constant use of the word friend or brother in this story and in A Song of Ice and Fire speaks to a personal pain that Martin has experienced. Traeger takes the rejection hard, but he makes an effort to move on. There is another love interest later, a girl named Laurel. Quote, pretty. Traeger didn't think so. Not at first. She was too tall, a half-foot taller than he was, and she was a bit on the heavy side and more than a bit on the awkward side. Her hair was her best feature. Her hair was red-brown in winter and glowing blonde in summer that fell long and straight down past her shoulders and did wild, beautiful things in the wind. But she was not beautiful, not the way Josie had been beautiful. End quote. The relationship goes well. For a time, Traeger has settled for Laurel, so you would think he would be the one that ends the relationship. She could never fill the space he had saved for Josie. But it is not Traeger that loses interest in Laurel. It is Laurel that loses interest in Traeger. Donnelly, a friend of Traeger's, sparks a connection with Laurel. Don insists he has more in common with her than Traeger does, as if Traeger is the obstacle keeping them apart. Not so long after, Laurel breaks up with Traeger, admitting she has long since stopped loving him. She has decided to be with Don. Traeger pleads with her to stay, but it's already over. Their relationship is dead. Quote,
I don't love you anymore. I'm sorry, I don't. It seemed real at the time, but now it's almost like a dream. I don't even know if I ever loved you, really. Dawn, he said woodenly. Laurel flushed. Don't say anything bad about Don. I'm tired of hearing you run him down. He never says anything except good about you. Oh, Laurel, don't you remember? The things we said, the way we felt. I'm the same person you said those words to. But I've grown, Laurel said, hard and tearless, tossing her red gold hair. I remember perfectly well, but I just don't feel that way anymore. Don't, he said. He reached for her. She stepped back. Keep your hands off me. I told you, Greg, it's over. You have to leave now. Don is coming by. It was worse than Josie. 1,000 times worse.
End quote. Why was it worse? Traeger settled for Laurel. She wasn't even attractive to his standards. That is what makes it worse. He settled for her, and she had the nerve to leave him. And not just that, she left for his friend. Betrayal. This sends Traeger into depths of depression previously unseen. He decides to hell with real love, to hell with real women, to hell with friendships and connections. All he needs are the corpses. On the corpse world of Scracky, the dead aren't just used for mining ore and for sexual pleasure. They are also used in gladiator arenas. Traeger begins the story repulsed by the idea of brothels and arenas populated by the dead. In the end, Traeger becomes a handler in an arena. He takes part in corpse combat. Quote, the enemy corpse is huge and black, its torso rippling with muscle, a product of months of exercise, the biggest thing that Traeger has ever faced. It advances across the sawdust in a slow, clumsy crouch, holding the gleaming broadsword in one hand. Traeger watches it come from his chair atop one end of the fighting arena. The other corpse master is careful, cautious. His own dead man, a wiry blonde, stands and waits, a morning star trailing down in the blood-soaked arena dust. Traeger will move him fast enough and well enough when the time is right. The enemy knows it, and the crowd. End quote. The story closes with him thinking that the universe isn't fair. Everyone is lying. There's nothing but rot. Traeger feared being alone, but trying to connect with others only to fail just made him angry, and in the end, his anger only led to hatred. He embraced the darkness that once repulsed him. He's a corpse killer, an unrepentant necrophile, a defiler of the dead. The story ends with Greg Traeger in bed with the corpse. The last thought he shares is bleak. Quote, of all the bright, cruel lies they tell you, the cruelest is the one called love. End quote. Martin revisits the idea of corpse sex workers in A Dance with Dragons, only this time, the girl is not literally dead. In Dance, Tyrion visits a brothel in Selhorys. The girl Tyrion purchases for his carnal pleasure is a slave. Tyrion is too focused on his own lust to realize the state of her. It is only after he has finished that he has a moment of clarity. Quote, he rolled off feeling more ashamed than sated. This was a mistake. What a wretched creature I've become. Do you know a woman by the name of Taisha? He asked, as he watched his seed dribble out of her onto the bed. The whore did not respond. Do you know where whores go? She did not answer that one either. Her back was crisscrossed by ridges of scar tissue. This girl is as good as dead. I have just fucked a corpse. Even her eyes looked dead. She does not even have the strength to loathe me. End quote. Martin has carried over some ideas, characters, and themes from his earlier works to use in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is why I consider Littlefinger the Meathouse man of Westeros. The beautiful, fiery, redhead Catelyn rejected him, which sent him on the path of villainy. The shame he suffered at the hands of Brandon Stark only cemented this. Forget love. Women are all whores. Littlefinger is rich and successful. He could have bought a manse in King's Landing. he could have found a woman to be his companion. Despite his humble beginnings, he is doing quite well in life. But it is not enough for him to win. Others must lose. Those that shamed him must suffer, which is why he targeted House Stark in his grand scheme. Part 5. The Player. Littlefinger used Lysa to get back at her sister, the woman that spurned him. Lysa was never as sharp as her sister. Even their uncle Brendan recognized that. Jaime Lannister recognized it as well. Lysa was timid and shy, vulnerable. Men like Littlefinger and Andrew Tate prey on women and girls like this. Insecure women, naive women, inexperienced ones. This is what makes Sansa Stark such a prime target, but we must needs wait before we get to her. Because Lysa was so madly in love with Littlefinger, she lost sense of her house words: family, duty, honor. This is a transgression of the theme, love is the death of duty, the death of honor. Littlefinger considers himself to be a great player in the Game of Thrones. We have covered his motivations in great detail. Now let's go over the plots and schemes he's been conducting to determine just what he's up to. What is the player playing at? To begin, I do not think Littlefinger has one long-term master plan. There are too many things that have happened over the course of the books that he could have never accounted for. Events that he benefited from but never intended to happen. Littlefinger talks about this in Book 4. Quote, "You would never believe half of what is happening in King's Landing, sweetling. Cersei stumbles from one idiocy to the next, helped along by her council of the deaf, the dim, and the blind. I always anticipated that she would beggar the realm and destroy herself, but I never expected she would do it quite so fast." End quote. As a player, Littlefinger's game must remain fluid. It must needs be fluid, or else there will be no ways for him to capitalize on chaos. For as we all know, chaos is. This is why he gets upset with Tyrion for lying to him about the Myrcella and Sweet Robin marriage proposal. Tyrion presented him with a great prospect, a Lannister heir as his ward and hostage. It would have been an excellent opportunity. Another reason Littlefinger was upset with Tyrion is because, well, Tyrion played him. He outsmarted him. Quote, "Littlefinger was not appeased. I do not like being lied to, my lord. Leave me out of your next deception. Only if you'll do the same for me," Tyrion thought, glancing at the dagger sheathed at Littlefinger's hip. "If I have given offense, I am deeply sorry. All men know how much we love you, my lord, and how much we need you. Try and remember that." With that, Littlefinger left them. End quote. A deceiver does not like being deceived. It must have been embarrassing for Littlefinger to realize he was not clever or knowledgeable enough to see the deception. He played right into Tyrion's hands. Lysa poisoned Jon Arryn on the orders of Littlefinger. This was to open the office for Hand of the King. Littlefinger predicted Robert would turn to his best friend to fill the role. It's a predictable move. I think that was as far as Littlefinger planned. The idea would be to wait for Eddard to come to court and to see what he would do before making any further moves. There was always the small chance Ned would turn down the job. What would Littlefinger do then if he had established one long, great plan that involved Ned coming to court? The Game of Thrones involves wheels within wheels, fires within fires. It does not benefit one to be so rigid in what plans they make. Catelyn bringing the cat's paw dagger south was a happy accident for Littlefinger. No, I do not think he was part of Bran's assassination. Joffrey hired the would-be assassin to kill Bran. His motives are spelled out by both Jaime and Tyrion. It was not Littlefinger. It was not Mance. It was just Joffrey. All Littlefinger did was send a cryptic message north through Lysa. The assassination attempt helped to further his plans. Littlefinger, being ever so fluid, takes advantage of the situation presented to him when Catelyn brings the dagger. Quote, "I would have told you that there was only one knife like this at King's Landing." He grasped the blade between thumb and forefinger, drew it back over his shoulder, and threw it across the room with a practiced flick of his wrist. it struck the door and buried itself deep in the oak, quivering. "It's mine." "Yours?" It made no sense. Petyr had not been at Winterfell. End quote. Throwing the knife like that in front of Catelyn, you just know he thought that was the coolest thing ever. Cringe. Littlefinger then tells Catelyn that he lost the dagger in a wager. Someone else now claims possession of the blade. Quote, "Who?" Catelyn demanded, her mouth dry with fear. Her fingers ached with remembered pain. "The imp," said Littlefinger as Lord Varys watched her face. "Tyrion Lannister." End quote. Varys knows Littlefinger is lying. He knows Littlefinger is playing a game. He's playing his own game, never forget. But that is why Varys is watching Catelyn intently. He wants to see if she will believe the lie. And she does. Catelyn already suspects the Lannisters were responsible for the attack on Bran. She's just unsure if it was one or all of them. It never occurred to her that it was Joffrey. It never occurred to many readers either, myself included. Not to get too off topic, but I think this is good evidence that Joffrey was indeed the one that tried to have Bran killed. Martin wanted readers to puzzle out which Lannister was responsible for hiring the assassin. He knew most of us would never consider Joffrey as a suspect when Joffrey is a Lannister. In any case, this lie serves its intended purpose. It causes Catelyn to seize Tyrion at the inn, which leads to Tywin raiding the Riverlands. Littlefinger did not know what his lie would lead to. He just knew it would cause chaos. Littlefinger thrives on chaos. Chaos is a Littlefinger knows there is no way for him to directly strike at the Starks. He has no armies. Even if he did, he would have no cause to do so. He would be disrupting the king's peace if he did attack unprovoked. The king's peace isn't just the idea of general stability in the realm. It's based on a real Anglo-Saxon law that Martin has incorporated into the story. Breaking the king's peace would be essentially breaking the law. Littlefinger would be in the wrong. And Ned did say Robert Baratheon loved waging war on troublesome vassals. Littlefinger knew the only way to cause war would be to provoke House Stark into war with another rival house. The enmity between Stark and Lannister was easy for him to manipulate to achieve that end. The Lion of Lannister and the direwolf of Stark snarl and scrap. Their petty feud plays out in a cycle of plot, counterplot, ambition, murder, and revenge. When Eddard Stark falls from power, when he is arrested in the throne room, Littlefinger is there having aided in his betrayal. This is Littlefinger's moment, sneaking up behind Eddard Stark, pressing a dagger to his throat to deliver the line, "I did warn you not to trust me, you know." Littlefinger might have felt badass, but this wasn't a badass moment. This was not impressive. This was cringe. Eddard's leg was broken. He was shocked to see his men being butchered by the very same gold cloaks he thought were there to help him. Eddard was too shocked by Littlefinger's sudden but inevitable betrayal to defend himself. This is the only way someone like Littlefinger could ever hope to win a challenge of strength. Brandon defeated him in a one-on-one duel. How does Littlefinger defeat Brandon's brother? With sneak tactics. Cringe. Littlefinger previously proposed allying with Eddard if Eddard would betray Stannis. Eddard had plans to remove Joffrey and his siblings from the succession because of their bastardy. Lord Stannis Baratheon is Robert's true heir. The reason Littlefinger wanted Stannis out of the tapestry is because Stannis is a truly just man. He is too law-abiding for a man like Littlefinger. Recall that Stannis once planned to close all the brothels in King's Landing. Littlefinger owns brothels, and there are probably several other shady business ventures Littlefinger is conducting behind the scenes. Stannis on the throne would put an end to them all. Stannis would put an end to him. Littlefinger encouraged Eddard to crown Joffrey and to use him as a puppet king. Wed Eddard's children to Cersei's to help shore up his power. But Cersei's children are bastards. Eddard is a man of truth and honor. He could never go along with such a plan. When Eddard refused the plan, Littlefinger acted against him. To be sure, Littlefinger would have always acted against him. He simply can't be trusted. But backing Stannis is the reason why he acted sooner rather than later. Brandon Stark has long since been dead, but it seems Littlefinger transferred some of his anger at Brandon over to his brother Eddard. I believe this is because Eddard married Catelyn. He got to have the woman Littlefinger so desperately desired. For Eddard, he was only doing his duty. For Littlefinger, this was personal, which is why I think Littlefinger is the one that suggested Joffrey should have Eddard executed. Joffrey is susceptible to suggestion. Remember, it was Littlefinger that convinced Joffrey to hire dwarves to perform at his wedding. Now, I don't think Littlefinger told Joffrey what to do, but I do think he hinted that executing Eddard is what a strong king would do. Your Grace, your sweet dear mother wants Eddard sent to the wall, but perhaps that is too soft of a solution. Eddard's brother is there, and so is his base-born son. Is this a punishment or a family reunion? Previous kings would never let an enemy off so easily. Just saying. The line about Cersei and Sansa having the soft heart of women doesn't sound like Joffrey. It's much too articulate, much too eloquent. It sounds like he's repeating something someone else has said. It sounds very misogynistic, something like an incelish person would say. After Ned is dead, Littlefinger is quick to seize the opportunity this moment of chaos presents for him, the chance to claim Sansa. In Book 4, Cersei remembers Littlefinger made an offer for Sansa's hand. Quote, Petyr Baelish had offered to wed the girl himself, she recalled, but of course that was impossible. He was much too low-born. If Joff had only done as he was told, Winterfell would have never gone to war, and father would have dealt with Robert's brothers. End quote. Littlefinger might be master of coin, a member of the King's Council, but he is still too low-born to marry into a great family. At least that was the case by the end of Book 1. By the end of Book 2, Littlefinger has been granted a new position of status and power, Lord Paramount of the Trident and Lord of Harrenhal. Quote, I thank you humbly, Your Grace. I suppose this means I need to see about getting some sons and grandsons. Joffrey laughed, and the court with him. Lord Paramount of the Trident, Sansa thought, and Lord of Harrenhal as well. She did not understand why that should make him so happy. The honors were as empty as the title granted to Haelin the Pyromancer. Harrenhal was cursed. Everyone knew that, and the Lannisters did not even hold it at present. End quote. Sansa does not realize, neither does the rest of the realm, but the reason Littlefinger was so happy is because now he is a man of great status. He is now a High Lord, which means now he is able to marry into the upper nobility. In Book 3, Littlefinger makes one of his greatest moves as a player. He offers to wed Lysa Arryn. This is to bring the Vale of Arryn into order. Quote, to be sure, it would not have been fitting for a daughter of Riverrun to marry one so far below her. Littlefinger spread his hands. Now, though, a match between the Lady of the Eyrie and the Lord of Harrenhal is not so unthinkable, is it? Tyrion noted the look that passed between Paxter Redwine and Mace Tyrell. End quote. Littlefinger just became a High Lord. He is very new to the title. The idea of him marrying a woman from a much older house is seen as presumptuous, almost offensive. This is where we get the term up-jumped. It's typically used for a family or a person that has been catapulted or trebucheted into a higher level of society. This is usually done by a monarch or a great lord as a gift for a favorite. Such promotions can also be given to someone of lesser status as a reward for a special achievement. It is said Aegon the Conqueror up-jumped the Tyrells to the position they are in now. There are some in the realm that still begrudge Aegon for making them the Lords Paramount of the Mandor. So you can see how Littlefinger, already hoping to mix his blood and name with those of older houses, might be viewed as a tad too much too soon. See, they tell you to work hard and you'll be rewarded, but it's all a lie. You can turn your bootstraps into a slingshot and shoot for the moon, but even if you stick the landing, you'll still be seen as an outsider. Meritocracy is an illusion. Gentle viewers, it is past time for the revolution. We have to eat the rich. The title of Lord of Harrenhal sounds good on paper, but the castle doesn't just come with lands and incomes, it also comes with a curse. The curse comes from Harrenhal, the man who built the castle before the conquest. Harren, his sons, and his household were burnt to death by Aegon the Conqueror after Harren and his hubris refused to yield the castle to the Valyrian Dragon Lord. And ever since, many of those that have claimed the castle have died mysterious deaths. Is Littlefinger accursed? He has never actually set foot in the castle, but then again, neither did Janos Slynt, and he still ended up dead as hell. Janos Slynt was upjumped to Lord of Harrenhal, but it wasn't long before Tyrion sent him to the wall where Jon executed him for insubordination. The curse of Harrenhal seems to work in mysterious ways. The council allows Littlefinger to marry Lysa Tully. Lysa has not bent the knee to Joffrey, and it is feared she may enter the war against the crown. With his new marriage, Littlefinger gains another title, Lord Protector of the Eyrie and the Vale of Arryn. Lysa was Sweet Robin's regent and ruled the Vale in his name, but after marrying Littlefinger, she gives all her power to him. She would give anything to him. By ruling the Vale from the Eyrie, he has quite literally risen to the peak of his power. I'm afraid it's only downhill from here, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Remember, the sigil of House Baelish is the head of the Titan of Braavos, one of the 9 wonders made by men. The fall is coming, and Littlefinger only has himself to blame. Because despite marrying Lysa and gathering all of his power and status, Littlefinger is not yet satisfied. By this time, Catelyn Stark has died at the hands of the Freys at the Red Wedding. The woman Littlefinger so desperately desired is now dead. Did he care? Did he weep? On the show, Littlefinger still seems to have cared for Catelyn. But no similar scene exists in the books. Catelyn may be dead, but she had a daughter, one that looks very much like her. The Lannisters prevented Littlefinger from marrying her, but he still managed to claim her anyway. Sir Danto spirits Sansa out of the Red Keep into Littlefinger's boat on the night Joffrey died. Littlefinger uses the chaos at the Purple Wedding to achieve his heart's desire. That's because for Littlefinger, chaos is a soft-spoken Sansa who loves silk, songs, and chivalry. Sansa may look like her mother, but she does not act like her mother. Sansa is nowhere near as sharp. She is much more tractable, much more naive, an easier target for Littlefinger. In this way, Sansa is more like her aunt than she is her mother. Lysa was not receiving the love from her family when she needed them the most. Her father basically sold her to Jon Arryn to be a broodmare. The pregnancy was hidden, so the only person that could offer her comfort was her father. But her father never wanted that child. He had it killed inside her womb with moon tea. He would not have comforted her. He was disappointed with her, perhaps even angry. His daughter was deflowered, despoiled by a low-born wretch from the Fingers. This would have made Lysa vulnerable to predators like Littlefinger, men who pretend to love them when really they are just taking advantage of them. Sansa is much the same. She is young, naive. She desires to be loved and to love someone else. She wants romance. She makes an excellent target if you're someone like Littlefinger. The 1961 public service announcement called Girls Beware presents 4 cases of young girls having to deal with sexual predators. It gives them advice on how to deal with such situations. It warns young girls to stay away from older men that seek their company.
Robert frequented the malt shop in his spare time, which was considerable, as he'd finished high school and didn't work. Here he sought out the company of younger teenagers because he wasn't accepted by those of his own age group. Mary and her girlfriend could always be found at the malt shop after school. Mary had seen Robert before and thought he was very good-looking, so she was naturally flattered when he singled her out and struck up a friendly conversation. When he offered her a ride home, she was only too happy to accept. They drove around for a while and talked. Mary was a good listener, and Bob enjoyed nothing more than talking about himself.
Men like this prey on younger women because they don't know how to approach women of their own age. They don't know how to talk to them. They never matured like their peers, and because they are so socially undeveloped, they cannot compete in the dating field, so they seek out others who have not matured, typically younger girls. These are inexperienced girls who don't know what they are dealing with. This is Sansa Stark, who is now in Littlefinger's possession. To be sure, Westeros is not our real world. By Book 3, Sansa has had her first moon's blood. Littlefinger could very well marry her, have children with her, and it would be seen as socially acceptable. But the book does not present his behavior as being romantic or caring. It's licentious. It presents Littlefinger as a predator. Sir Dantos is killed for his services, and Littlefinger now has a pretty little bird to keep as his personal pet. He presents Sansa to his betrothed as his bastard daughter, Elaine Stone. Quote, Lysa Arryn did not seem greatly pleased to see her. Sansa did a deep curtsy, her head bowed. A bastard, she heard her aunt say. Petyr, have you been wicked? Who was her mother? The wench is dead. I'd hoped to take Elaine to the Eyrie. End quote. Littlefinger calls Elaine's mother a wench, but we know Elaine is actually Sansa, so her dead mother would be Catelyn. This is that clue. Littlefinger has come to hate Catelyn. There is no empathy for her. Why would there be? She called him a friend, a brother. She sided with Brandon Stark and then his brother. No doubt Littlefinger feels the wench got what she deserved. If only she married him, the nice guy, she wouldn't be rotting in a river. Well, at least that's where Littlefinger thinks she is. Sansa is present for her aunt's wedding and bedding. After years of secrecy, Lysa promises to be loud as she wants, and she makes good on that promise. The event takes place at Littlefinger's home on the Fingers, in that tiny flint tower he calls the Drear Fort. Because it is so small, everyone present can hear Aunt Lysa in her pleasure. And now, you get to hear it too.
Petyr, her aunt moaned. Oh, Petyr, Petyr, sweet Petyr, oh, there, Petyr, there, that's where you belong. Make me a baby, Petyr, she screamed. Make me another sweet little baby, oh, Petyr, my precious Petyr.
Lovely. Littlefinger has served on the small council for years. He has filled his own pockets with gold from his business ventures in King's Landing, but the Fingers are as desolate and barren as ever. Littlefinger has done nothing to better the lives of his meager small folk. He has risen, but they have not benefited from his success. Mayhaps Littlefinger is trying to remain inconspicuous. He doesn't want to be seen as enriching his own lands, but he doesn't have to build himself a giant castle. He doesn't have to build 2-level houses for each of his people. He could do something, but he doesn't. Why? Because he doesn't live on the Fingers anymore. He doesn't care about the people. He never has. He doesn't care about anyone anymore. It is here at Littlefinger's humble home that Sansa's induction into the game begins. Quote,
Are you fond of games, Elaine? The new name would take some getting used to. Games, I suppose it would depend. You must miss your father terribly, I know. Lord Eddard was a brave man, honest and loyal, but quite a hopeless player. He brought the seed to his mouth with a knife. In King's Landing, there are 2 sorts of people, the players and the pieces. And I was a piece? She dreaded the answer. Yes, but don't let that trouble you. You're still half a child. Every man's a piece to start with, and every maid as well. Even some who think they are players. He ate another seed. Cersei, for one. She thinks herself sly, but in truth she is utterly predictable. Her strength rests on her beauty, birth, and riches. Only the first of those is truly her own, and it will soon desert her. I pity her then. She wants power, but she has no notion what to do with it when she gets it. Everyone wants something, Elaine, and when you know what a man wants, you know who he is and how to move him.
End quote. We know what Littlefinger wanted, Catelyn, but he could not have her. So now he has settled on the next best thing, her daughter Sansa. Remember Meathouse Man? When Traeger could not have Josie, he settled for another. It is clear from the first moment they meet, Littlefinger sees Catelyn in Sansa. Quote, Septa Mordane quickly took a hand. Sweet child, this is Lord Petyr Baelish of the King's Small Council. Your mother was my queen of love and beauty once, the man said quietly. His breath smelled of mint. You have her hair. His fingers brushed against her cheek as he stroked one auburn lock. Quite abruptly, he turned and walked away. End quote. This is very inappropriate behavior on Littlefinger's part, comparing Sansa to Catelyn, the woman he's been lying about sleeping with, touching her cheek, gently stroking her hair. Littlefinger immediately sees the sexual potential in Sansa. By touching her in this intimate way, he also becomes possessive of her. Catelyn was supposed to be his. Sansa will be soon enough. Look at the effect Sansa has on him, and she didn't have to do anything except exist. Merely looking at Sansa transports Littlefinger back in time, back to Riverrun when he and the Tully heirs were children. Catelyn, and by extension Sansa, is Littlefinger's kryptonite. By book 3, when Sansa is going by Elaine, she is considered a woman fit to be wed, but Littlefinger's treatment of her remains as inappropriate as ever. It is, by all accounts, grooming. She just endured months of abuse by Joffrey. Now she has to endure the leering, lecherous Littlefinger. He has Sansa pretending to be his bastard daughter. This is not actual incest, but Littlefinger has made it so that the girl he wants to sleep with is also pretending to be his daughter. Littlefinger even once told Sansa that in a different life she may have been his daughter. And yet he is comfortable intimately touching her, stroking her, sitting her on his lap, and even kissing her on the mouth on multiple occasions. Quote,
I did not expect you to come back so soon, she said. I am glad you've come. I would never have known it from the kiss you gave me. He pulled her closer, caught her face between his hands, and kissed her on the lips for a long time. Now, that's a sort of kiss that says, welcome home. Say that you do better next time. Yes, father. She could feel herself blushing.
End quote. Sansa, as Elaine, is calling Littlefinger father. Yes, she's calling him daddy. They have a daddy-daughter relationship now. Martin has given their relationship an incestuous lean. Sansa is young and naive, as we have covered. She is having her first sexual experiences. So far, they have all happened without her consent, and they have all happened under extreme duress. The last lesson she learned on the topic of sex came from Cersei Lannister, who taught her that a woman's body can be used as a weapon of seduction. None of this is healthy. We see Sansa putting some of her training to use when she seduces Harry the Heir in a Winds of Winter sample chapter. It is rumored that another of her chapters in Winds will be considered controversial by the fandom. This has led to speculation the chapter will be sexual or violent in nature, or perhaps both. Let us put our focus back on the man with the plan. Littlefinger has exactly what he wants. A young naive girl that looks very much like Catelyn, but who has none of Catelyn's edge. He can mold Sansa as he wants. Like the women of his brothel, where can she go? What can she do? If she doesn't like being kissed, if she doesn't like being touched, if she wants to tell him no, there's the moon door. He doesn't say it, and he doesn't have to because of the implication. No, I don't think Littlefinger would literally throw Sansa from the moon door if she rejected him. I think he's happy knowing she has nowhere to run to. I think he is glorying in the fact she is so dependent on him. She needs Littlefinger to survive. Sansa likely feels indebted to Littlefinger. He saved her from mortal peril. How can she tell him no? Notice, Sansa blushed after kissing Littlefinger. Disturbingly, this suggests perhaps she's enjoying his romantic advances. Again, this is all new to her. She is young and inexperienced. Perhaps she finds it exciting. She isn't aware of the danger he presents. Littlefinger, like Varys, now has his own pretender to play with, a special pawn to use in the great game. Whereas Varys has young Griff, who claims to be Aegon Targaryen, Littlefinger has Sansa Stark, who claims to be Elaine Stone. Varys has a feigned boy pretending to be the real thing. Littlefinger has the real thing pretending to be a feigned girl. Littlefinger has a Stark. Varys has a Targaryen. Ice and fire. But what is next for Petyr Baelish? He has power, he has status, he has the girl he has always wanted. What now? Final chapter. The Fall. It was only inevitable. Now that Littlefinger has a powerful piece to play with, and he is in a position of great power, it is time to make more major moves. But in doing so, he will make the same fatal mistake many others before him have made. He will overextend himself. He will reach too far, and in doing so, he will fall. Littlefinger has long since distanced himself from the power of King's Landing, which was obviously a smart measure. For one, it would not go over well for him when it's discovered he has been harboring Sansa Stark this whole time. Cersei really hates Sansa, as she believes the girl was a co-conspirator in her son's death. Besides, King's Landing is an absolute mess right now. There is no good reason for Littlefinger to link himself to the capital. He must remain fluid and find new allegiances. Littlefinger's eyes are no longer looking south. They haven't for quite some time. He is now looking north. Some have theorized Littlefinger is trying to seize the Iron Throne. It is the most prominent position of power in the realm after all. If he wants status, what's a higher status than king? However, I disagree. I don't think the Iron Throne is Littlefinger's endgame. For one, it would be almost impossible for Littlefinger to become king without causing a great controversy in the realm. Many other more nobly born people would have to die before that became a possibility. Besides, I don't think Littlefinger wants to be the face of power. I think Littlefinger wants to be the power behind the power. The man behind the man, the one behind the curtain, the voice whispering into the ear of the real power. Being a monarch puts a large target on a person's back. Cersei Lannister was even wise enough to see that, which is why she calls Jaime a fool and tells him no one who wears a crown is ever safe. It is also a role that comes with far too much attention. You're surrounded by guards day and night, hectored by counselors and courtiers. Petitioners beg you to hear their cases. It is also a role that's rigid, immobile. It leaves little room for fluidity. Littlefinger does not want to be king, but being friends with a high lord or a queen, why, that would be a valuable station indeed. Sansa is believed to be the only surviving child of Eddard and Catelyn Stark, one of Robb's heirs. As a result, she has the best claim to Winterfell. The Lannisters tried to take advantage of this by marrying Tyrion to Sansa, but now that both are considered fugitives, it is no longer possible to use her to secure Winterfell. At least the Lannisters can't. Littlefinger is perfectly positioned to make Sansa Lady of Winterfell. Perhaps he has even bigger plans up his sleeves. Regardless, empowering Sansa is his next major move. The Vale Lords have not been happy with his appointment as Sweet Robin's regent. They viewed it as one of the many follies Lysa committed in the last months of her life. Marrying Littlefinger was also viewed as one of those follies. The Vale is not King's Landing. Littlefinger does not have many friends here. The Vale Lords do not trust Littlefinger. He is an outsider, an upjumped lord. Several of them have combined their grievances to form the group called the Lords Declarant. Quote, The six had gathered at Runestone after Lysa Arryn's fall, and there made a pact together, vowing to defend Lord Robert, the Vale, and one another. Their declaration made no mention of the Lord Protector, but spoke of misrule that must be ended, and of false friends and evil counselors as well. End quote. They do not speak of Littlefinger in their declaration, but it is not hard to decipher what their issue is all about. This group is very reminiscent of the Lord's Appellant from our own real-world history. These were a group of nobles that formed under the reign of King Richard II. The Lord's Appellant wanted to remove 5 of the king's favorites from his inner circle. They believed the presence of these 5 individuals was forming a rot in the reign of King Richard. Remember when I spoke of monarchs rewarding friends and favorites and how some of the nobility might take issue with that? This is what I mean. The Lord's Appellant believed removing these favorites would set the realm to rights. Unlike the Lord's Declarant, these nobles rebelled. They went to war and they won. This led to the Merciless Parliament, where many of the king's favorites were executed or fled into exile. There are 6 Lords Declarant, but only 2 concern us for now, Anya Waynwood and Sir Lyn Corbray. Lyn is not actually against Littlefinger as the other 5 are. He is actually working for Littlefinger. His allegiance was easily bought because Lyn has no money. He is currently broke, and like most broke-ass men, he is very angry. Littlefinger has tasked Lyn with joining in every plot formed against him so that Lyn can report back on Littlefinger's enemies. Though Anya Waynwood has signed her name with the other Lords Declarant, she has agreed to a marriage pact between her ward, Sir Harold Harding, and Littlefinger's so-called daughter, Elaine. Harry is also known as Harry the Heir because he is a cousin to Sweet Robin. Because of his Arryn blood, he is the closest thing Sweet Robin has to an heir. Sansa does not realize these moves don't just benefit her, but Littlefinger as well. But by presenting these political moves as gifts for Sansa, he is trying to buy her affection. He is also trying to impress her. Look how clever I am. He requests a kiss, and Sansa no doubt feels obligated to give him one. This is manipulative behavior. Littlefinger says Sweet Robin will die. The boy is sickly, yes, but doesn't appear to be dying, which means Littlefinger has plans to kill him. It would be an easy thing to do, an easy thing to hide. Sweet Robin has been sickly his whole life. The Vale Lords, including the Lords Declarant, want to see Jon Arryn's son defended, to be sure, but they know the boy has never been robust. By the time of her death, Lysa Arryn was still nursing him, a boy of 8 and still at the breast. This is not the beginnings of a proper lord. Harold Harding is a much more dashing and masculine figure. We know that he is virile, having fathered 2 bastard daughters already. Sweet Robin dying would be a tragedy, but I think the Vale would get over it pretty quickly after the ascension of Harold Arryn, who was already known as the Young Falcon. Harold Arryn would marry Sansa Stark, and just like that, Littlefinger and the Vale armies head north to reclaim Winterfell in her name. But how would Littlefinger explain where Sansa Stark came from without incriminating himself? Well, he could suggest Lysa Arryn had something to do with it. Sansa was her niece after all. The small council did fear Lysa would act against them, or that Sansa escaped with the help of Ser Dantos, who died rescuing her and made her way to the Vale on her own. Littlefinger could say protecting Sansa was one of the things his late wife begged him to do. Promise me, Littlefinger. Promise me you'll protect her. So he pretended Sansa was his bastard. When Sansa's survival becomes public, there's entirely too much happening in King's Landing for Cersei to be able to retaliate. If she has the power to retaliate, we must also consider winter has come. There are other pressing political matters besides Sansa Stark revealing herself. So how does Sweet Robin die so that all this can come to be? His maester has been giving him a potion called Sweet Sleep, which is said to remain in the body after consumption. Sweet Sleep helps with Sweet Robin's seizures and is sometimes used to soothe his tantrums. However, frequent use can cause the potion to build up in the body and turn toxic. The Maester is very careful not to let this happen. He can be relied upon to remember every administration of the potion. Elaine Stone, unfortunately, is not so reliable. She is Sansa Stark, and Sansa has had trouble remembering things in the past. For example, Sansa remembers the Hound sneaking into her bedchamber and stealing a kiss from her on the night of the Battle of the Black Water. This never happened. Could it be that she misremembers the amount of sweet sleep given to Sweet Robin, which causes his death? Martin has said Sansa Stark has a large, unreliable narrator moment coming in her story. Sweetness in this series is often synonymous with something sinister. This is likely how Sweet Robin comes to a bitter end. This paves the way for Harry to become Lord and Sansa to become his lady. Sansa has never relished the idea of marrying her sickly cousin, and her thoughts regarding him have turned darker as of late. She does not hate him, but she's expressed no deep fondness for him either. The question is, will Elaine poison him by accident, or will she do it on purpose? Once the marriage is complete, the Vale armies will finally enter the fray. They will be needed in the north. This is Sansa Stark's road to Winterfell, and Littlefinger will come with her. On the show, Littlefinger wed Sansa to Ramsay Snow. Sansa took the place of Jane Poole and received the harsh and terrible treatment Jane did. This will not happen in the upcoming books. To quote George R.R. Martin, "My Littlefinger would have never turned Sansa over to Ramsay. Never. He's obsessed with her. Half the time he thinks she's the daughter he never had, that he wishes he had if he'd married Catelyn, and half the time he thinks she is Catelyn and he wants her for himself. He's not going to give her to somebody who would do bad things to her. That's going to be very different in the books." Martin said Littlefinger would never give Sansa away to someone who would do bad things to her, not that he would never give her away. Harold Harding has no reputation for abusing or mistreating women. He would likely cheat on Sansa, but this is not unusual for men in the world of Westeros and beyond. Littlefinger can't keep Sansa for himself as much as he may want to. That alliance would be fruitless. Sansa has a great claim, but no armies and no income. Littlefinger is a great lord, but the Riverlands are in turmoil. The Vale has fresh forces. But by setting his sights on Sansa Stark, Petyr Littlefinger Baelish has overreached himself, because it is Sansa that will lead to his great fall. Littlefinger played a major role in the downfall of House Stark. Littlefinger had more than a hand in the death of Eddard Stark. He had Sir Dantos killed in front of Sansa. Dantos was her protector for many months. She was Jonquil. He was her Florian. Littlefinger helped Olenna Tyrell in a plot to kill Joffrey. He manipulated her aunt into poisoning Jon Arryn, and then he murdered her, pushing her out the moon door after she began to confess his secrets. Sansa saw him do it. Sansa witnessed him lying about doing it. Sansa assisted him in those lies. We must hope that at some point Sansa puts it all together. If Sansa found out Littlefinger had a part in her father's death, that would change how she views him. Littlefinger would be just as vile and villainous as Joffrey and Cersei in her eyes, maybe even worse. Sansa must learn what Littlefinger has done in order to turn on him, and turn on him she must. There is a prophecy that hints that she will. When Arya is with the Brotherhood Without Banners, she is there when they meet the woman known as the Ghost of High Heart. This Woods Witch has the gift of foresight. She uses her ability to tell the Brotherhood the glimpses of the future that she sees. In one of these visions, she witnesses, quote,
"I dreamt a wolf howling in the rain, but no one heard his grief,"
the dwarf woman was saying.
"I dreamt such a clangor, I thought my head might burst, drums and horns and pipes and screams, but the sad sound was the little bells." I dreamt of a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs. And later I dreamt that maid again, slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow."
End quote. The clangor and the sad sound of the little bells was a vision of the Red Wedding, Catelyn killing poor Jingle Bell Frey. The maid at the feast was Sansa and her hairnet, which contained the poison used to kill Joffrey. Sansa does slay a giant of sorts when she is in the Eyrie building a castle made of snow, and her cousin, Sweet Robin, interrupts. He pretends his toy doll is a giant, using it to stomp through one of Winterfell's walls. Sansa snatches the doll, rips its head off, and impales it on the castle's gatehouse. The ghost of Highheart's vision has been realized. Or has it? Remember, the sigil of House Baelish is a titan's head. A titan can be considered a type of giant. The snow-covered castle might not be the fake Winterfell Sansa built in the Eyrie. It could be the real Winterfell. Winterfell was burned, but it is not gone. It's just broken. It's still inhabitable. The Boltons and Freys are making use of it. If they are removed, then another force could occupy the castle. Maybe they are removed by Jon's wildling army, or Stannis and the Northmen. Mayhaps the armies of the Vale arrive just in time to lend support to Stannis. Maybe Prince Rickon's cannibal army from Skagos might also contribute. That last one is a wild shot, but it has to be considered. Regardless, it is expected that the last of the Starks will eventually make their way back home. Winterfell will be the place where various armies come together to fight in the next long night. I believe Sansa will be within the walls of Winterfell once more, and if sitting within the snow castle in the Eyrie strengthened her, Sansa will feel even more empowered when she's back home. But how does this lead to her turning on Littlefinger? How does she learn he helped destroy her father? There are very few people in the story that are still alive who were in the throne room when Littlefinger betrayed Ned. The person with the highest chance of incriminating Littlefinger might be Littlefinger himself. Criminals often feel the need to tell others about their crimes. It's a compulsion. We saw this happen with Lord Varys and Sir Kevan in the epilogue of A Dance with Dragons. I believe something similar will happen with Littlefinger and Sansa. Littlefinger tells her entirely too much. He thinks his secrets are safe with her. Varys was smart. He told his secrets to a dying man. Littlefinger has somehow forgotten Sansa informed on her own father, which presents a dangerous dynamic for him because now he's pretending to be her father and telling her all of his secrets, just like her real father did. The last time this happened, Sansa ran to Queen Cersei to tell her about her father's plans. This helped the queen to act against Eddard. Was Sansa solely responsible for the fall of her father? No, but she does bear some of the blame, and her age and inexperience does not excuse her actions. We all know Arya would have never done such a thing. She saw Cersei for who she was. Sansa is the disloyal member of her family, the same way Tyrion is the disloyal one in his. Martin wrote them this way intentionally. There is no queen to run to this time, and that's because, in this case, Sansa might be the queen that must act on this information. There is part of Littlefinger's plan that we have not yet covered. When Littlefinger is bemoaning Cersei's failed reign, he mentions the potential for an upcoming conflict, the so-called War of Three Queens. The title of King in the North is still in play, which means Sansa isn't just Sansa Lannister on paper, she is also Princess Sansa Stark. Littlefinger can't run back to Queen Cersei. Arguably, the most powerful player in the capital is now the High Sparrow, and Littlefinger is much too sinful of a man to find company with him. The Vale will not have Littlefinger either. The Riverlands are too much in turmoil to be of any use at the moment. The North may be all that's left for him. If he can't run to the Queen in the South, perhaps he will try to create a Queen in the North. So Littlefinger will do what he's always done, try to rise high by using a naive girl as a stepping stone. But Littlefinger was never quite good at this. He may have manipulated Lysa for years, but he lost control of her in the end. The same thing will happen with Sansa Stark. except instead of him killing her, Sansa will kill him. By telling Sansa his darkest deeds, Littlefinger is clearly trying to impress her. It makes him look smart, clever, powerful. He's still stuck trying to impress a young Catelyn Stark. But this is a deadly mistake. Littlefinger thinks he finally has someone he can confide in, the girlfriend/daughter he has always dreamed of. Littlefinger has forgotten a simple truth. Knowledge is power. Sure, he keeps some things from her, but she has been privy to many of his darker deeds. She also has power over him in a way he's not aware of. Cersei Lannister taught Sansa that a woman's power is in seduction. If you had read Sansa's chapter in The Winds of Winter, you can see she is learning how to use that power on Harold Harding. What happens when she starts to use it on Littlefinger? Could he resist her? Doubtful. He will fold. Littlefinger said it himself. When you know what a man wants, you know who he is and how to move him. Sansa will soon learn that what Littlefinger wants most of all is her, and she may come to suspect Littlefinger does not truly have her best interest in mind. It might be that Sansa seduces Littlefinger and she gets him to tell the full story of what he did to her father and her family. By giving Sansa to Harold Harding and by using her claim on Winterfell, Littlefinger is giving her something she has never really had before: power. Harold Harding will be Harold Arryn and Sansa will be his lady. She may even be the Lady of the Eyrie and Queen in the North. Littlefinger is no doubt hoping to be the power behind their power. He would make Harry and Sansa into nobles, believing that he would still be able to control them, but he will be wrong. Divulging his plans to Sansa and helping her achieve power will ultimately lead to Littlefinger's catastrophic fall. We know that Littlefinger is marked by the curse of Harrenhal. Doom is likely in his foreseeable future. Wouldn't it be most fitting that his doom is caused by all the things he plotted to acquire? He wanted the status of a High Lord, and so he was given Harrenhal. He wanted a beautiful woman by his side, and so he stole Sansa. Both will be his undoing. Martin promised in The Winds of Winter we have more deaths and more betrayals. We have more marriages. Sansa and Harold will wed. Martin has also hinted Sansa will misremember something very important. It is likely this has to do with Sweet Robin and his medicine. Sansa, or rather Elaine, will forget how much medicine Sweet Robin has received, and she will order a maester to administer more. Or the maester may refuse, and Elaine might go behind his back and give Sweet Robin the medicine anyway. Why would she do that? Because Sweet Sleep has been used to make sure Sweet Robin appears calm and well behaved when he is around other nobility. I think there will be an upcoming event where Sweet Robin needs to be on his best behavior, which is why Elaine will order him to take a dose of his medicine. It could be that the maester she orders isn't Sweet Robin's typical maester. They are no longer in the Eyrie after all. This new maester would be unaware of Sweet Robin's previous administrations, and so after Sweet Robin takes his last dose of Sweet Sleep, he will die from the overdose. After the death of his cousin, Harry the Heir will rise as Harold Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Protector of the Vale. Sansa Stark will become Lady Sansa Arryn. She has always been a little bird after all. Tyrion was not executed as Littlefinger had hoped, but Tyrion has fled the country. I think this is enough to invalidate Tyrion and Sansa's marriage. A fat bag of gold might also help. Regardless of whether Sansa becomes Lady of the Eyrie or the Queen in the North, she has all the information she needs to realize Littlefinger is not her ally as he pretends to be. Sansa might be a slow learner, but all the pieces of the puzzle are there. Littlefinger has done grievous harm to House Stark and House Tully. He may have saved Sansa from King's Landing, but that wasn't merely for her benefit. It was because of his selfish desires. When Sansa finally puts it all together, she will have the power to lay out all of Littlefinger's crimes before him. She will charge him with high treason, conspiracy, murder. There is only one punishment that can fit these crimes, and that is death. I can hear Littlefinger now, pleading, "You can't do this to me. I made you what you are. Sansa, please, I treated you like my daughter. I loved you." Littlefinger's demise on the show may have felt anticlimactic, the road to his doom confusing and poorly plotted, but his reaction to his death sentence felt very accurate for the character. Because he is a coward, a craven, he will not meet death with dignity. He will whine, he will cry, he will beg, but he will die all the same. Speaking of the show, I like the parallel of Littlefinger on his knees begging for help in front of the future king of Westeros. A callback to the first season when Sansa was on her knees begging King Joffrey for help. The ghost of High Heart did not see a maid in a snow-covered castle slaying a giant. She saw a maid slaying a titan. Littlefinger has climbed the ladder of success in the world of Westerosi politics, going from the Lord of the Drearfort to Lord Paramount of the Trident. He's become a great man, and so he thought any great man deserves a great lady to stand beside him. But by taking Sansa Stark, he has overextended himself. He's exposed one major vulnerability, his love for Catelyn. Sansa will exploit this vulnerability. She will bring Littlefinger to justice. Littlefinger will give Sansa the power required to take him down. And the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And that's it. Littlefinger is a loser. Like you. I know this video took a while to come out after it was announced. Remember when I said never announce what you plan to do? Yeah, I broke one of my own rules and look what happened. I know there's at least one person out there that was looking forward to it because they kept reminding me to make the video. And to that person I say, lo siento. Pobrecito, I know you have been waiting a long time, but now the video is here. It's done. But this was a very complicated script to write. I really wanted to drive home the idea that Littlefinger is a misogynistic incel, that his character is familiar in fiction and in real life. Initially, the script contained references to several other novels, including, and I'm not kidding, Twilight. I wanted to reinforce the friend zone aspect of Littlefinger's character with examples from other works, but Twilight didn't fit the horror theme that goes along with this channel. Those novels are horrible in another way. Wow, taking shots at Twilight. That is so 2008, so 2000 and late. I also decided to reread The Stand, which I loved, and to watch the new miniseries adaptation, which I did not. The Harold Lauder section is very relevant to Littlefinger as a character, but that was also my attempt to do a deep dive into another series. As I said, I have a finite number of A Song of Ice and Fire ideas for the channel, so I hope Martin gets some new material out soon, and no, I don't mean a coffee table book. Anyway, that's it for the excuses. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, time to call the banners. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think motivates a man like Petyr Littlefinger Baelish. Don't forget to ring that bell to turn on notifications, and also so I can remind you, Littlefinger is Lord of Harrenhal, which means he is the owner of the largest whorehouse in Westeros. Thank you to the following Patreon supporters and channel members, including Philip E., Daniel, and Jessica P. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.